Chapter 22:10. Roar, roar. With a deep roar that sounded like a lion's roar, the four alien guards broke through the void and rushed in front of Ji Tianxing. Swish, 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 swish. Dark red light flashed as the four of them spread out and surrounded Ji Tianxing. Their hooves stepped on the pitch-black rocky ground, moving slowly and circling Ji Tianxing. The halberds and long sabers in their hands were all pointed at Ji Tianxing, surrounded by dark red murderous aura. An invisible murderous aura suppressed Ji Tianxing like a huge mountain, making his blood flow sluggish and his magic power a little sluggish. Ji Tianxing frowned as he sized up the four non-humankind guards with a cautious look on his face. He muttered in his heart, "The power they have is a little strange. It is not the power of the five elements, nor is it the magic power cultivated by absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. I have been to so many star areas and seen so many races, but I have never seen people of this race. Maybe they are from a star area even further away, or a new race." The burial of heaven reminded him through soul transmission, since they appeared on the core of the illusory spirit star. Have you never suspected that they might be from the illusory spirit race? Ji Tianxing shook his head and said no. When I entered the holy land of the illusory spirit race, I saw the writings and murals of the illusory spirit race. The illusory spirit race is good at mind and soul power. Their brains are different from ordinary people, but their appearance is definitely not like this. The burial of heaven said non-committally, "You will know whether they are or not when you try." Therefore, Ji Tianxing searched his memory and tried to use the language of the illusory spirit race to ask the four alien guards, "Who are you? Why are you here?" Although his pronunciation was not standard and sounded a little bad, the language of the illusory spirit race was correct. However, the illusory spirit race's language he spoke was basically correct. If the other party was from the illusory spirit race, they would definitely be able to understand him. However, something unexpected happened to Ji Tianxing. When the four alien guards heard him, their expressions changed. Their eyes shone fiercely, and dark red flames of murderous aura burst out of their bodies. Roar, roar. All four of them let out a muffled roar simultaneously, wielding their long blades and halberds while releasing tens of dark red blood-red light beams, launching a besieging attack towards Ji Tianxing. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and transmitted his voice to Burial of Heaven. "What kind of rotten idea are you giving me?" At first glance, it was obvious that they had a grudge against the illusory spirit clan. As soon as he heard me speak the language of the illusory spirit race, he wanted to kill me immediately. Burial of Heaven comforted him indifferently. "It's just a few low-level guards. You can easily deal with them." Ji Tianxing hurriedly brandished the Burial of Heaven sword, slashing out sword lights that filled the sky as he fought with the four foreign race guards. At the same time, he sent a voice transmission to the Burial of Heaven. "How many low-level guards? Are you kidding me? Which world's low-level guards would have the power of a martial sage? Unless they did not come from a low-level world, but from the upper world." Burial of Heaven was also stunned for a moment and said doubtfully, "But they don't look like people from the upper world. We have never seen this race in the upper world." Ji Tianxing defended against the attacks of the four foreign race guards as he said, "Anyway, this matter is very strange. Let me deal with them first, then I will slowly think about it." The attacking moves of the four foreign race guards were a little strange. They were not like the martial artists of the five elements world, who paid attention to the beginning, the end, the transition, and the form. The attacking moves of the four guards were all well-practiced killing moves, like the simplest and most brutal killing moves. Moreover, the power that they used was also dark red like blood, completely condensed from killing intent and a special aura. Every single move he executed was executed in a grand manner with surging killing intent, and it was domineering and ferocious to the extreme. Although the strength of the four guards was only equivalent to a rank 5 or 6 martial sage. However, it was Ji Tianxing's first time fighting with a martial artist of this race. He was not familiar with the attributes and martial skills of the other party, so he was more cautious. After a full 10 breaths, he had exchanged more than 20 moves with the 4 guards before he had a rough idea of the other party's moves. Thus, he no longer hid his strength and used his unique sword skill. Breaking Sun's sword. Burial of Heaven waved his sword and slashed out more than 10 dark gold sword radiances in an extremely violent manner, slashing towards the 4 guards. The 4 guards hurriedly waved their long sabers and halberds, letting out angry roars and releasing dark red killing intent. Instantly, the 4 of them were enveloped by the dark red killing intent, as if they were wearing a layer of dark red armor. Bang, bang, bang. The huge golden sword slashed the 4 guards, causing a series of dull sounds to be heard. The killing intent armor of the 4 guards was slashed into pieces, and they flew out in a sorry state, falling into a pile of rocks. Just as they got up, they rushed towards Ji Tianxing even more furiously. At this moment, Ji Tianxing waved his sword, clapped his palms, and used his unique secret skill. Heavenly Dragon Palm. Heaven-breaking sword. His left hand slapped out a mountain-sized golden dragon claw, slapping 2 guards away on the spot, smashing them into the ground hundreds of miles away. His right hand waved his sword and slashed out a huge sword that could split heaven and earth, splitting one of the guards into 2 halves on the spot, causing dark red blood to splatter everywhere. As for the last non-human guard, he had just rushed in front of him, holding his halberd and thrusting it fiercely. He clenched his left hand into a fist and punched the guard's head, using the star-breaking fist. Bang! With a dull sound, the star-breaking fist hit the guard, blasting his head into pieces, splattering blood and brain matter all over the ground. What surprised Ji Tianxing was that the non-human guard whose head was blasted into pieces did not die on the spot. Moreover, this person's divine soul did not escape from his body. The headless body got up again and rushed over without caring about its own safety, waving his halberd and thrusting out dozens of blood-red light. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing could not help but frown and exclaim in a low voice, "Oh my God, is this possible? His vitality is too tenacious, and his willpower is too strong, isn't it?" While he was shocked, he waved the Burial of Heaven sword and stabbed out a cold light, aiming directly at the chest of the headless guard. The cold light flashed, and in the next moment, it pierced the scales on the chest of the headless guard, exploding with a loud bang. Bang! With a dull sound, the dark red scales on the chest of the headless guard shattered, and his entire body was blown into pieces, scattering in the valley. This time, his body was really smashed into pieces, and he did not get up again. Ji Tianxing suddenly understood and said to himself, "I see. It seems that the weakness of these non-humans is the scales on their chests." The Burial of Heaven thought for a moment and added, "Maybe they can't be called a weakness, but the source of their strength, closely related to their lives." At this moment, a deep roar came from a spacious cave not far away. Ji Tianxing turned his head and saw more than a dozen non-human guards in black armor running out as fast as lightning. Many of the guards were holding long sabers and halberds, and they were surrounding a non-human man in silver armor with scarlet eyes. Chapter 22:11. When the silver-armored man appeared with a dozen or so guards, he was shocked. Ji Tianxing realized that the situation was not good and vaguely felt heavy pressure. The 2 alien guards he had slapped away earlier were covered in blood and in a sorry state. Seeing the silver-armored man come out, the 2 of them ignored their injuries and hurriedly retreated to the sides and knelt down. The 2 of them lowered their heads respectfully and mumbled a lot of strange syllables. Ji Tianxing listened for a while, but couldn't understand a single word. However, he could roughly guess that the 2 injured guards were most likely reporting what had happened. Sure enough, after the silver-armored man heard them, he turned his head and glanced at Ji Tianxing. 2 dark red flames rose in his scarlet eyes, flickering and dancing. He put his left hand behind his back, and his right hand held the hilt of the sword hanging at his waist, walking towards Ji Tianxing. The dozen or so black armored guards around him also gripped their long sabers and halberds, pointing at Ji Tianqing. Everyone's eyes were cold, and their bodies exuded a terrifying, murderous aura. Ji Tianqing looked at the crowd with an indifferent expression and secretly communicated with buried heaven through God's soul voice transmission. At present, it seems that this group of aliens may have a grudge against the illusory spirit race. They came to the illusory spirit star core and have already occupied the illusory spirit race's holy land. I don't know how many people are hiding in the Holy Land. If we want to take the star core, we have to deal with this group of people first. Burial of Heaven reminded him. They have a lot of people, and the strength of their leader is unfathomable. We shouldn't act too hastily. If you have a chance, you can capture an alien alive and use the soul-searching secret technique to interrogate him. Maybe you can get the answer. Even if you can't communicate with words, you can at least read their soul memories, right? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. This method is feasible. I'll try my best. At this moment, 16 black armored guards surrounded him. The man in silver armor also stopped 100 steps away from him. He looked at him with burning eyes and opened his mouth to speak. What's your relationship with the illusory spirit race? The silver-armored man was speaking the language of the illusory spirit clan. However, his accent sounded even worse than Ji Tianqing's. It was even weirder. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing vaguely understood. He replied slowly in the language of the illusory spirit race. I have nothing to do with the illusory spirit race. The 10 or so non-humankind guards didn't change their expressions at all. They didn't react to his words at all, and still looked ferocious. Only the silver-armored man understood his words. The flames in his eyes flickered a few times, as if he was considering whether his words were true or false. After a moment of silence, he asked again, Are you from this planet? After saying that, he pointed at the 5 elements world behind him that was shrouded in golden light. Ji Tianqing nodded. The flames in the silver-armored man's eyes grew brighter and brighter, and a smile appeared on his broad and firm face. Good, very good. He seemed to be in a good mood. He clapped his hands and said in the broken language of the illusory spirit race, You, take me in, and I will spare your life. Ji Tianqing sneered and replied coldly, Ridiculous. What right do you have to spare my life? Also, who are you? Where are you from? Why are you on this star core? Why do you want to enter our world? It was probably because he had said too much and asked too many questions at once. The silver-armored man didn't understand all his questions. He only understood that his attitude was to refuse. Suddenly, the flames in the silver-armored man's eyes flickered, and a ferocious sneer appeared on his face. His whole body emitted a blazing, killing intent. You have no choice. It's your honor to lead the way for heaven conquering. After saying these 2 sentences in the language of the illusory spirit race, the silver-armored man waved his hand and gave an order. Suddenly, the 10 or so non-humankind guards roared and pounced on Ji Tianqing with murderous intent. Roar, 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 roar. In an instant, the long saber and halberd danced in the air, and dark red blood radiance filled the area. It turned into various saber radiance, sword shadows, spear radiance, and sharp blades, and engulfed Ji Tianqing. A terrifying, murderous aura sealed off an area of a few hundred miles, fiercely suppressing Ji Tianqing. The meridians and bones in his body started to twist, and his blood seemed to be boiling. It was about to break free from his blood vessels and meridians and explode. They can affect the blood, chi, and mind of others with their invisible aura. This race is really not simple. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. He quickly swung the Burial of Heaven sword and launched a counterattack. Big Dipper sword, sky-capturing claw. In the face of more than 10 martial sage realm non-humankind guards, he didn't dare to be careless. He used all his strength to launch a deadly attack. In order to increase his combat strength, he even used the celestial dragon body and turned into a 100 feet tall golden armor giant. As a result, the pressure on him was greatly reduced. His body flickered as he shuttled back and forth between the canyon and the empty space, smoothly avoiding the attacks of the guards. Occasionally, There was some dark red blood radiance that slashed his body, but it only caused minor injuries. His life was not in danger. Bang, bang, bang. Boom, 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 boom. Ji Tianxing and the dozen or so outsider guards exchanged more than 100 moves. The heavens and the earth cracked, and dazzling light filled the sky. Deafening explosions resounded through the entire canyon. The incomparably violent impact shook the huge, illusory spirit star nucleus. Various dark red blood radiance and silver starlight fragments burst out like raindrops and scattered in the empty space. While the two sides were fighting, the man in silver armor stood in the same spot and watched expressionlessly. He didn't have any intention to intervene. After about 100 breaths, Ji Tianxing and the non-humankind guards exchanged more than 100 blows. Ji Tianxing's body was covered with wounds, and pale golden blood flowed out. He had suffered some minor injuries. On the other hand, the non-humankind guards were all covered in blood and wounds. Many of them had their hands and feet cut off. They were seriously injured. At this moment, the man in silver armor waved his hand and shouted in a deep voice. Immediately, the non-humankind guards retreated, put away their weapons, and stopped attacking. The man in silver armor looked at Ji Tianxing with his burning eyes. He clapped his hands and praised, "Very good. Even in my clan, brave and skilled warriors like you are rare. I admire you. I'll give you one last chance. Work for me, be my servant, help me expand my territory, and I'll give you glory." He was still speaking in the language of the illusory spirit race, but he spoke very slowly and with an awkward accent. This was also the longest sentence he had ever spoken. Ji Tianxing sneered and shook his head. "I only work for myself. You and your race are far from qualified." The man in silver armor was not surprised at all. He sneered and said, "You are very good and proud, but unfortunately, I will kill you. Remember, you will die under the blade of Yu, the bravest captain of the Third Fleet." Chapter 22:12. Ji Tianxing was taken aback by Yu's name and identity. Combining the memories of the past, he instantly understood many things. However, he did not have time to think carefully as the two scarlet light beams shot towards him. Star-shattering fist. At this critical moment, he raised his left hand without hesitation and blasted out a star fist radiance. Bang! The huge starlight fist hit the two scarlet light pillars hard, and a loud, muffled sound rang out. Sparks flew in all directions as the star radiance exploded and turned into a violent shockwave that spread in all directions. The non-humankind guards who were closer to the explosion were instantly blown away by the shockwave, falling into the valley in a disorderly manner. Ji Tianxing was also sent flying back 100 steps. His feet left 2 deep trenches in the ground. Just as he steadied himself, Yu rushed toward him again and punched his head with both fists. Before the crimson flame fist radiance reached him, the violent killing intent had already hit him. It was like thousands of needles pricking his skin. Ji Tianxing did not hesitate to wave the burial of Heaven's sword and stabbed out 7 rays of dazzling cold light. 7 stars sword. The 7 cold sword rays formed a formation and enveloped Yu's figure. However, with a series of loud bangs, the 7 sword rays were all shattered by the flame fist radiance. The crimson killing intent dissipated, but the flame fist radiance did not weaken much. It landed on Ji Tianxing's chest. Bang! Amidst a muffled sound, a terrifying force blasted Ji Tianxing away. While he was still in midair, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of pale golden blood. He drew an arc in the air and smashed into the ruins 10 miles away with a plop sound, splashing rocks all over the sky. When he got up from the rubble, he looked down and saw a deep hole in his chest. Golden blood was seeping out. Ji Tianxing frowned, and his eyes became very serious. This person's strength is so strong. Even if I use the celestial dragon tyrant body, I still can't take a punch from him? Burial of Heaven said through voice transmission. It seems like this guy's strength has surpassed the martial sage realm. He did not use any weapons or his full strength. You are no match for him. You can only avoid him for now. Ji Tianxing naturally knew that in Yu's strength was unfathomable. He was comparable to a martial god. It was impossible for him to take away the ethereal star nucleus. The only thing he could do now was to escape from this place. Shua! He manipulated the power of space and turned into a ray of white light. He instantly pierced through the void and flew toward the world of 5 elements. And you saw him turn around and fly away, and immediately grinned. His eyes were full of contempt. He strode across the void and crossed 100 miles in the blink of an eye, catching up to Ji Tianxing. He raised his fists and blasted out 2 dark red light pillars. The dark red, murderous aura formed 2 beams of light that were like 2 thunderbolts streaking across the void, about to strike Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing sensed great danger. He felt a chill run down his spine as though death was approaching. At the moment of life and death, he turned around without hesitation. He struck out a 5-colored sacred thunder with his left hand and a star sword with his right hand. God's slaying sword, the star sword that was 100 feet long, hit one of the dark red light pillars, and there was a loud boom. The star sword and the light pillars collapsed at the same time, and there was a strong shock wave. The 5-colored sacred thunder also hit one of the light pillars. Both of them shattered at the same time and turned into a colorful shock wave. Ji Tianxing did not have time to escape. He was hit by the violent shock wave and was sent flying toward the world of 5 elements. His injuries had worsened. Blood flowed from his mouth and nose, and his consciousness was blurry. However, he relied on his strong willpower to stay awake. He recklessly exploded his strength and flew toward the end of the ethereal star nucleus. A few thousand miles in front of him was the golden light seal of the world of 5 elements. At the end of the star nucleus, there was a void crack. He had returned to the world of 5 elements from there. He saw that he was getting closer and closer to the void crack. However, and you caught up with him again. He waved his hand, and 2 dark red blood light blades slashed down from the sky. Ji Tianxing had no choice but to grit his teeth. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, turned around, and slashed out a light blade. Heavenly Dragon Slash. The dark golden sword light that was 100 feet long carried an indomitable and domineering aura. It met the 2 blood light blades head-on. Boom! There was another crisp explosion. The sword light and the blood light blades shattered at the same time. They turned into a dark red hurricane and engulfed Ji Tianxing. Swoosh! The violent hurricane engulfed him, and he was covered in wounds. Blood splattered, and he was sent flying toward the end of the star nucleus. The hurricane flew for 1,000 miles before it gradually dissipated. Ji Tianxing's figure was revealed. He was already riddled with scars and bruises. His injuries were even worse, and his strength had been greatly reduced. He fell to the hard ground with a thud. Fortunately, he was even closer to the void crack. He ignored his injuries and pain and sprinted as fast as he could. In just 3 short breaths, he had crossed 200 miles and plunged into the void crack without any regard for his own safety. Swoosh! The pitch-black void crack swallowed his figure, and he disappeared instantly. At the same time, and you turned into a bloodlight and flew to the end of the illusory spirit star nucleus. He saw Ji Tianxing enter the void crack with his own eyes. However, he did not chase after him. He stopped in the void crack. He frowned and looked at the void crack. Flames flickered in his eyes. He seemed to be weighing his options. Soon, more than a dozen black-armored guards flew over and landed behind him. One of the guard captains bowed respectfully, revealing an inquiring expression as he mumbled a few words. And you thought for a while, and then nodded. He gave an order with a dignified face. The guard captain quickly turned around and left. He returned to the canyon and entered the holy land of the illusory spirit clan. About a quarter of an hour later, the guard captain returned with more than 60 black armor guards. A total of 80 guards gathered behind Yu, and Yu waved his hand and gave the order. He was the first to enter the void crack. Swoosh! A black light flashed, and his figure was swallowed by the void crack. Then, the 80 black-armored guards entered the void crack one after another. In the 100,000 mountains, under the famous Broken Soul Cliff, there was a pitch-black abyss that was tens of thousands of feet deep. In an inconspicuous corner of the cold and dark abyss, an inconspicuous speck of dust was buried in a pile of rocks. Compared to the entire abyss, this speck of dust was just a drop in the ocean. No one would notice it. However, no one would have thought that this speck of dust was Ji Tianxing. After he passed through the void crack and escaped from the illusory spirit star nucleus, he returned to this abyss. However, he was not in a hurry to escape. Instead, he stayed. Chapter 22:13. For a full quarter of an hour, Ji Tianxing remained in his dust state. He didn't move at all, nor did he reveal any aura. His disguise was flawless. Burial of Heaven was a little worried and asked through soul transmission, "You've finally escaped. Why don't you take the opportunity to escape from here and get rid of those aliens?" Ji Tianxing replied with soul transmission, "I will never give up on what I want to do. Since I've decided to take the ethereal star core, how can I give up halfway?" "What?" Burial of Heaven was shocked and asked incredulously, "But the ethereal star core has been occupied by those aliens. It's not easy for you to escape. Do you still want to hide here and wait for the opportunity to go back and snatch the ethereal star core?" "Why not?" Ji Tianxing said with certainty. "Although I can't defeat in you and those aliens, I still have a chance. Judging from various signs, they are aliens from a distant star area. Most of them are on a mission and have no intention of refining the ethereal star core. Compared to the ethereal star core, they are more interested in the five elements world. I bet that when Yu sees me escape into the void crack, he will probably bring his men and chase after me. When they enter the five elements world, I will come back and have an 80% chance of snatching the ethereal star core." Hearing what he said, Burial of Heaven also felt that it made sense. He said in a serious tone, "As you always say, wealth comes from danger. Since you feel confident, then take the risk. Anyway, it won't take long. We will see the result in half an hour at most." Ji Tianxing said with a playful tone, "No need for half an hour. They're already here." Sure enough, in the darkness at the bottom of the abyss, there was a sudden spatial fluctuation. The next moment, a tall and sturdy figure appeared out of thin air in the darkness. Then, a series of spatial fluctuations came out one after another, and black figures appeared one after another. There was no doubt that these people were in Yu and the 80 black armor guards. About 10 breaths later, everyone had arrived, and Yu also released his divine sense and covered a radius of nearly 1,000 miles to figure out the terrain of this area. Thus, he led the black-armored guards out of the abyss and flew to the Broken Soul Cliff. After staying on the Broken Soul Cliff for a while, he weighed the pros and cons before flying north. Not long after, Yu and the black-armored guards disappeared into the horizon. At this time, Ji Tianxing, who was hiding in a corner of the abyss, removed his disguise. Shua! He returned to his original form and flew toward the bottom of the abyss with the sword of Burial of Heaven in hand. Burial of Heaven let out a sigh of relief and said in a relaxed tone, "I didn't expect you to make the right bet. The guy actually brought 80 black-armored guards here to kill you." Ji Tianxing frowned and said with a solemn expression, "Maybe he's not just hunting me down. He's more interested in this world." Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, and then said in a strange tone, "So, they were stationed on the ethereal star core before and never made up their minds to enter the five elements world. Or maybe they didn't find the entrance to the five elements world. Now, you've accidentally become their guide and brought them into the five elements world." Ji Tianxing nodded and said in a low voice, "I have a bad premonition. Perhaps the Shinwu continent, which has finally calmed down, will experience another great upheaval." Burial of Heaven consoled him. "You're worrying too much. Even if there really is a great upheaval, it's something that the three war gods should be worried about. Besides, how much trouble could Yu and his 80 non-humankind guards cause? The most important thing right now is for you to recover from your injuries and take the ethereal star core." Ji Tianxing nodded and did not say anything else. Soon, he passed through the spatial crack and returned to the ethereal star core. The giant star core was still stuck in the golden barrier, floating motionlessly in the void. Ji Tianxing flew to the end of the canyon and entered the wide cave. After walking along the dark passage for a while, he entered the ethereal tribe's sacred land and saw the broken 7 halls. He circled the 7 halls twice and used his divine sense to scan them several times, but he did not find a single person, just as he had expected, and you had taken away all of the foreign races. Now, he was the only one left on the ethereal star core. Thus, Ji Tianxing entered one of the halls and began to treat his injuries. He took a few Saint-grade pills and used the power of the Heaven Mend Pearl to quickly heal his injuries and restore his magic power. After about half a day, his injuries stabilized, and his magic power had recovered by about 70 to 80%. He then began to set up a large array in the ethereal tribe's sacred land, preparing to take the star core. He wanted to set up a top-notch Saint-grade array called the Summer Mustard Seed Array. This Saint-grade array was a mysterious array that many master artificers would use when refining spatial rings. As the saying goes, a mountain can be refined to the size of a sesame seed. Even a mountain can be refined to the size of a sesame seed. Ji Tianxing took out thousands of supreme-grade spirit stones and hundreds of jade slips from his spatial ring. Then, he summoned Lan Kuan, Bai Long, Jinshan King, Ancestor Sanju, and the others. Although they were only in the tribulation passing realm, they could help him set up the array and save time. Ji Tianxing distributed the spirit stones and jade slips to everyone, assigning them a corresponding task. Then, he began to cast spells to set up the foundation of the array, shooting out golden light pillars that crisscrossed the entire sacred land. About 8 hours later, the foundation of the array was in its embryonic form. On the pitch-black rocky ground, thousands of golden arcs could be seen clearly, forming a huge and complicated net. Next, Bai Long, Lan Kuan, Jinshan King, and the others buried the spirit stones and jade slips in specific places according to his instructions. Everyone was busy, wholeheartedly setting up the array. Time passed quietly. Unknowingly, another half a day had passed. After everyone's joint efforts, the Summer Mustard Seed Array was finally set up. A 5-colored light shield with a radius of 400 miles enveloped the phantom spirit's sacred land, shining with dazzling brilliance and releasing powerful energy waves. Ji Tianxing kept Bai Long, Lan Kuan, Jinshan King, and the others back into the sword world. Then, he flew into the dark void and cast spells with a solemn expression, beginning to control the Summer Mustard Seed Array. Swoosh! The array began to operate, and the huge 5-colored light shield lit up with dense light, releasing a mysterious spatial power that extended in all directions. 15 minutes later, the vast power of the entire array spread to a range of 20,000 miles, enveloping the entire phantom spirit star core. Ji Tianxing began to exert force, manipulating the power of the Summer Mustard Seed Array, constantly squeezing and shrinking the star core. The phantom spirit star core was not an ordinary rock or meteorite, but the crystallization of the entire star, which could transmit magical power and star power. Chapter 22:14. Wanting to refine a star crystal core that was 20,000 miles in size was an extremely difficult task. In the current Shenwu continent, only the 3 martial gods had the ability to do so. Ordinary martial saints did not even dare to think about it. Only Ji Tianxing's knowledge was extraordinary. He had actually thought of using the spatial ring's Summer Mustard Seed Array to refine this star core. Of course, only he could do it. If it were any of the Shenwu continent's master refiners, even if they were proficient in the Summer Mustard Seed Array, they would not have the courage, or experience to do so. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. The huge ethereal star core had shrunk by half, and it was now only 10,000 kilometers in size. Ji Tianxing did not relax at all, and he continued to focus on controlling the array to refine the star core. As time passed, the ethereal star core became smaller and smaller. Of course, the speed at which it shrank also slowed down. The smaller the star core, the more difficult it would be to shrink it. Ji Tianxing's goal was to refine the ethereal star core until it was 50 kilometers in size. Only then could he successfully store it in the sword's world. Skyview City. Hundreds of thousands of warriors and commoners were still gathered in the city's plaza. Even though the 8 silver light curtains around the high platform had always been pitch black, the light curtains had always been black. However, many cultivators still waited patiently. Only a small number of people got impatient and left early. This was because everyone had received news that something had happened during the Sacred Assembly. And it was a major event. During the final battle for the championship, an accident had occurred in the Void platform, causing Ji Tianxing to disappear without a trace. Yuan Cheng had died on the spot. It was said that Yuan Zhen, who had presided over the Sacred Assembly, was grieving and had prepared to end the assembly hastily and return to arrange Yuan Cheng's funeral. However, the young martial saints of the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom and the Boundless Divine Kingdom had insisted that Yuan Zhen take responsibility for this matter. They had to investigate the truth and give everyone an explanation. Thus, Yuan Zhen had no choice but to lead the Divine Guard Governor and the Skyview City Lord into the void to search for Ji Tianxing's whereabouts. After he left, the 30 or so martial saints who had participated in the Sacred Assembly remained on the Void platform, waiting for news. Everyone agreed on a time limit of 2 days. After 2 days, regardless of the results of the search, Yuan Zhen would return. At this point, 1 day and 12 hours had already passed. In another 12 hours, Yuan Zhen would appear. The hundreds of thousands of warriors in the square were waiting with complicated feelings. They would talk about it occasionally. Everyone wanted to see if Ji Tianxing, who had always been good at creating miracles, would be able to escape death and miraculously survive. On the Void platform, on the white light disk, over 30 martial sages sat on the ground silently, waiting quietly. In the beginning, after Yuan Zhen left with his people, the crowd would still gather in groups of 3 to 5 to discuss. Will Ji Tianxing die? How terrifying was the Void Storm? Yuan Zhen brought Qin Zheng and Wang Tian City Lord into the Void. Could they find Ji Tianxing within 2 days? Could it be that they couldn't find Ji Tianxing and would be in danger instead? Even the 5 veteran martial sages communicated with each other secretly through sound transmission, trying to figure out and analyze the answer together. But now, a day and a half had passed. Everything that needed to be said and discussed had been said. The only thing they could do was to sit on the white disk and close their eyes, waiting for the results. Anyway, they had already agreed to stay and be witnesses. They couldn't give up halfway. Moreover, Yuan Zhen said that he would give the results in 2 days. If they waited patiently for another 12 hours, everything would be over. However, no one knew. In the alternate space near the Void platform, a young woman in an ice blue dress stood. Her expression was indifferent. She was carrying Tianju's clone, who was riddled with wounds and battered. She looked calmly at the Void platform and the hundreds of thousands of warriors in the Wang Tian City Square. She took in everyone's expressions and reactions. However, no one noticed her and Tianju's clone. Tianju's clone had been captured by her all this time. He felt extremely aggrieved. Seeing that she was silent for a few hours, he couldn't help but ask, Luo Shui, how long are you going to stand here? After Ji Tianxing escaped, he didn't return to Wang Tian City at all. He wouldn't dare to come back. Why don't we just let this matter go? Without waiting for Tianju's clone to finish speaking, Luo Shui said coldly, your son Yuan Zhen also didn't come back after escaping to the 5 Elements world. Since Yuan Zhen set a time limit of 2 days when he left, let's wait until the time limit is up. Tianju's clone's expression stiffened. Anger flashed in his eyes. This undoubtedly meant that he would be captured by Luo Shui for half a day. After hesitating for a moment, he tried asking, it's not a good idea to wait like this. Why don't I send a message to Yuan Zhen and ask him to come to Wang Tian City as soon as possible? Luo Shui, you also sent a message to Ji Tianxing. Ask him to return to the Void platform. Let's end this matter as soon as possible. Hearing Tianju's clone's suggestion, Luo Shui, martial god, thought for a moment before nodding slightly. That's good too, but don't think of playing any tricks. Only after you fulfill your promise will I let you go. Tianju's clone gritted his teeth with a face full of resentment. In the end, he nodded. Then, he sent a message to Yuan Zhen, which contained his personal order. Luo Shui, martial god, also sent a message to Ji Tianxing, asking him to return to Wang Tian City as soon as possible. North of Wang Tian City, there is a giant peak tens of thousands of feet tall, surrounded by clouds and mist. It was called Tianju Mountain. This was the martial arts holy land of Tianju Divine Nation, Tianju's training ground. There were close to 10,000 disciples on Tianju Mountain. They were all extraordinary talents in the Divine Nation. There were hundreds of houses and palaces on the peak of the mountain. It was grand and magnificent. In the depths of a magnificent palace, in a secret room full of spiritual qi, Yuan Zhen, who was dressed in a silver robe, was sitting cross-legged in a jade pool. He held a spiritual stone in each hand to heal himself. Although he had already washed up and changed into a brand new robe and hair accessories, he was still covered in wounds. However, he was covered in wounds. His face, neck, shoulders, and arms were all covered in cracks and wounds, especially his chest and abdomen, which were still empty. His bones and internal organs could be seen clearly. Although his plan had failed, he had suffered heavy losses, and he had been seriously injured by Ji Tianxing. But he was well aware that Father God had personally made a move. Ji Tianxing could not escape this calamity. Thinking of this, he felt slightly comforted. He had already made up his mind to heal himself first. After the 2-day period was over, he would return to the void stage and publicly announce Ji Tianxing's death. Of course, Ji Tianxing had died tragically in the void storm. His corpse had nothing to do with him. At this moment, a dense stream of light flew from the sky and landed in front of him. He felt something and opened his eyes. He found that it was a communication jade slip engraved with dragon patterns. Seeing the appearance of this jade slip, his eyes immediately lit up. He muttered to himself with anticipation, "It's actually a message from Father God? Father God must have killed Ji Tianxing and specially informed me." Chapter 22:15. Yuan Zhen was filled with joy, thinking that martial god Tianju had sent him good news. But when his divine sense read the information in the jade slip, the joy in his heart disappeared on the spot. He was stunned, his expression dull, his eyes wide open, revealing a look of disbelief. After being stunned for a long time, he came back to his senses and roared in disbelief. Why? Why didn't Ji Tianxing die? Not only did Father not kill Ji Tianxing, but he also told me to admit that he was first place and give him the corresponding reward. And he also told me to apologize to him? This is impossible. I don't believe that Father would tell me to do this. Yuan Zhen was so angry that he couldn't understand what was going on. His angry face twisted. He subconsciously clenched the jade slip and was about to crush it. But he immediately hesitated. Then, he carefully read the communication jade slip from beginning to end. Without a doubt, this was the message that martial god Tianju sent him. There was no falsehood. Suddenly, as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out, he fell limply into the spirit liquid pool, smiling bitterly and angry. After a full quarter of an hour, he pulled himself together and his emotions returned to normal. Then, he expressionlessly put away the jade slip, closed his eyes, and continued to heal. No matter how angry he was, no matter how humiliated or confused he was, he could not disobey martial god Tianju's orders. He also believed that Father must have made such a decision for a reason. Perhaps Ji Tianxing had been subdued by Father and became his lackey? Yes, it was very likely so. Yuan Zhen comforted himself. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. It was evening. Yuan Zhen's injuries were temporarily suppressed. Even if his complexion and aura were still very weak, it was not a big problem. He finished healing and got up to leave the secret room. Whoosh! He flew into the sky, left Tianju Mountain, and flew towards Wang Tian City in the south. After flying leisurely for half an hour, he arrived at the square in Wang Tian City. The hundreds of thousands of martial artists and commoners in the square suddenly saw him appear and immediately let out earth-shaking cheers and shouts. "Everyone look! It's First Highness Yuan Jun. First Highness really came back. Great. We'll know the results soon. Strange. We're Lord Qin and the City Lord. Why is it only the First Highness? Where did the others go? Countless martial artists noticed the anomaly and started shouting and discussing loudly. Yuan Jun did not even glance at those martial artists, directly landing on the high platform in the middle of the plaza. Then, he activated the formation, passed through the golden door of light, and entered the void platform. Shua! When he appeared on the white light disk, more than 30 martial saints who were resting with their eyes closed were immediately awakened. Everyone opened their eyes and looked at Yuan Jun in unison, their eyes filled with anticipation. Martial Saint Qing Shan, Chao Ying, Chun Yu, and the others hurriedly stood up and greeted him, asking about the situation with concern. Your Highness, you're finally back. Dare I ask, Your Highness, how is the situation? Is Ji Tianxing dead? By the way, Your Highness, we're Lord Qin and the City Lord. His Highness's aura is rather weak. Could it be that he is seriously injured? A few young martial saints from the Heaven and Divine Nation hurriedly came over and asked about his well-being. Yuan Jun remained silent and did not answer. He walked through the crowd and walked towards the white light disk. The 5 veteran martial saints, Taihao Yunqi, Jiu Jiu, Lu Baishuang, and the others all looked at him with burning eyes, waiting for him to announce the result. Lu Baishuang was the most worried and anxious. She had been suffering for the past 2 days. Now that Yuan Jun had returned and seemed to be seriously injured, she had a bad premonition and could not help but ask, Yuan Jun, did you find Ji Tianxing? How is he? Why are you the only one who came back alone? What Lu Baishuang asked was also what everyone was concerned about. The other martial saints all echoed and asked about the situation and the result. Yuan Jun could not stand the continuous questioning and could only bite the bullet and answer. Everyone, please calm down and listen to my detailed explanation. I brought Lord Qin and the Sky City Lord into the void to search. Unfortunately, we were attacked by the void storm and a group of meteorites. In order to protect me, Lord Qin and the Sky City Lord sacrificed themselves heroically. Not even their bones were left. Even I was seriously injured in the void storm and almost lost my life. Yuan Jun's face was solemn as he spoke in a low voice. He was very sad and sorrowful. Almost no one doubted his words and immediately believed him. Many martial saints looked worried and secretly clenched their fists. They were worried about what had happened to Yuan Jun. Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, and the others looked even more dignified and ugly. Yuan Jun was silent for a moment and continued. However, after I almost died, I finally found Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing, he is really lucky. He was swept into the void by the void storm and did not die on the spot. He is still alive, but he is seriously injured. Now he is still healing himself and can't come back with me. However, please wait patiently. You should be back soon. Hearing his words, many martial saints revealed looks of astonishment as they let out cries of disbelief. Oh my God, that guy really didn't die? Good people don't live long, but bad people live for 1,000 years. Cough, cough, that guy is too tough. I have long guessed that Ji Tianxing is not an ordinary person. How could he die so easily? All the legends about him are miracles. Even if he fell into the void, he could still miraculously survive. This is too normal. The many martial sages discussed animatedly. They were all emotional, and shocked. The hearts of Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, and the others finally settled back into their stomachs, and their furrowed brows finally relaxed. This was especially true for Lu Baishuang. The heavy stone that had been hanging in her heart had finally been lifted, and a bright smile appeared on her beautiful face. This is great. I knew that he would be fine. She was very emotional and murmured to herself. Although she had a smile on her face, her eyes could not help but be covered with tears. Jiu Jiu felt the same way and understood her feelings the most. She quickly held her arm and comforted her with a smile. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian could not help but look at each other and applaud excitedly. Taihao Yunqi, who was always gentle and elegant, also showed a gratified smile. looking handsome and sunny. In short, the 30-odd martial sages present were all shocked by this news and were discussing it endlessly. Only Yuan Jun stood there expressionlessly, silently waiting for Ji Tianxing to return. Making up a lie and announcing that Ji Tianxing was still alive was only the first step. When Ji Tianxing returned, he still had 3 things to do. At that time, it would be the most difficult and humiliating moment for him. Chapter 22:16. In the void, the ethereal star core that was originally 20,000 miles long had shrunk by almost 100 times. However, the dark star core was still embedded in the golden light barrier. After being refined by Ji Tianxing for half a day, it was only 200 miles long. The dust and gravel on the surface of the star core had long been pushed out and scattered in the dark void. After the ethereal star core had shrunk by 100 times, its texture had become unusually hard. The surface of the rock was even darker, with a cold metallic luster and a layer of hazy starlight. Ji Tianxing then ended the spell and removed the Sumrum mustard formation. He held the sword of Burial of Heaven in his left hand while his right hand shot out a dazzling golden light that turned into a dragon claw that covered the sky and grabbed the ethereal star core. Then he pulled the ethereal star core out of the void crack bit by bit. Swoosh! In a flash of golden light, the ethereal star core was put into the sword world and placed under a mountain near peaceful Soil City. He gave the Golden Mountain King a few instructions before closing the entrance of the sword world. Phew! It's finally done. After successfully extracting the ethereal star core, he looked relieved and let out a long breath. The Sword of Burial of Heaven said with relief, "With this ethereal star core, I don't have to worry about advancing to virtual god level. Let's go. We shouldn't stay here for long. We should go back." Ji Tianxing nodded and flew toward the void crack with the Sword of Burial of Heaven in his hand. Without the ethereal star core blocking the void crack, the golden light barrier was quickly repairing the gap, and the void crack was quickly closing. In at most 2 hours, the huge crack in the void would disappear. Ji Tianxing would have to look for another entrance if he wanted to enter the void crack again. Swoosh! In a flash of black light, he entered the void crack at lightning speed and disappeared into the darkness. The next moment, he was back in the abyss under the Broken Soul Cliff. The Broken Soul Cliff was located in the 100,000 Mountains, and the Luo Shui God Nation was hundreds of thousands of miles to the south. Ji Tianxing was wondering if he should go back to the Luo Shui God Nation first. At this moment, a dense stream of light descended from the sky and landed in his palm. After the flowing light dissipated, a light blue ice crystal jade slip appeared. The design of the jade slip was simple and dignified. It was engraved with icicles and emitted a mysterious aura. Ji Tianxing frowned as he sized it up. He couldn't help but mutter, "A communication jade slip from Luo Shui?" A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. He released his divine sense to invade the jade slip and read the information in it. After a while, he put away the communication jade slip and frowned even more doubtfully. Burial of Heaven saw his strange expression and asked, "What's wrong? Why is Luo Shui looking for you?" Ji Tianxing answered truthfully, "Luo Shui sent me a message, telling me to hurry back to Sky City and make a trip to the Void Stage." Return to Gazing Heaven City? Burial of Heaven was stunned for a moment and was also full of doubts. Yuan Jun and martial god Tianju have shed all pretense of cordiality with you. They're determined to kill you. At such a critical moment, aren't you walking into a trap if you return to Gazing Heaven City? Ji Tianxing shook his head and explained, "Luo Shui said that Yuan Jun will recognize my first ranking, give me a reward, and apologize to me in public." Burial of Heaven's tone was a little surprised. After thinking for a moment, he came to a realization and said, "It seems that the result is as I expected. Martial god Tianju's clone was defeated by Luo Shui. This must be the result of a negotiation between Luo Shui and Tianju." Ji Tianxing also understood this point. He nodded and said, "Yes, Luo Shui's true body came in person. Naturally, victory is in her hands. I reckon that not only did she defeat Tianju's clone, but she also used him as a hostage in exchange for this result. There's no time to lose. I'll rush back to gazing Heaven City first. After all, I want to participate in the sacred assembly for that wind, fire, divine pearl. With that, Ji Tianqing activated the small golden pagoda in his mind. He activated his majestic magic power and injected it into the mysterious golden pagoda. Immediately, the golden pagoda emitted a dazzling golden light that enveloped his entire body. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared on the spot. The bottom of the abyss returned to its cold darkness as if nothing had happened. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing's eyes regained light. He opened his eyes and saw a tall altar under his feet. The ground was engraved with the origin divine array. Around the divine array, there were 18 demon god statues of different shapes and sizes. The altar was in the middle of a spacious hall. The hall was brightly lit, but it was cold and deathly silent. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to all of this. He knew that this was the interior of Jiuqian 10 Absolute's tower, the 5th level of the divine tower. After calming himself down, he activated the origin divine array. Swoosh! The array emitted a sacred golden light and condensed into a door of light in front of him. He stepped into the door of light without hesitation, and his figure disappeared with a swoosh. In the next moment, he left Jiuqian 10 Absolute's tower and appeared at the peak of a mountain. It was evening, and the sun was about to set. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the mountain, and the surroundings were indescribably bleak and desolate. Ji Tianqing knew at a glance that the mountain under his feet was the former entrance to the Yin-Yang secret realm. This place was located in the north of the divine ruins. If he flew south, he would reach the heaven absolute divine nation. He knew that time was of the essence, so he did not waste any more time. He hurriedly controlled the sword of burial of heaven and flew south as fast as he could. For 4 days and 4 nights, he did not stop for a moment and did not relax at all. Even though he had used up a lot of his magic power and was very tired, he did not want to stop and rest. He knew that he had to hurry to Sky City and end this crisis. The longer he delayed, the more likely it was that something unexpected would happen. On the morning of the 5th day, he finally arrived at Sky City. The sun had just risen, and golden sunlight scattered over the entire majestic city. Ji Tianqing flew across the sky at lightning speed, heading straight for the city square. Even from afar, he could see that the huge square was still crowded with people. However, compared to the scene of 700,000 warriors gathered at the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly, the number of people now was at least half. Even so, Ji Tianqing was very surprised. He thought to himself, "I have already wasted 7 days. Those warriors who came to watch the show are really patient. They have waited until now and are still not willing to disperse." As he muttered in his heart, he flew across the square like a flowing light and landed on the high platform in the middle of the square. At the same time, many warriors who were scattered on the square noticed him and exclaimed, "Oh my God! Everyone look! Who is that person? He seems to be Ji Tianqing. It's really Ji Tianqing. It's him. It's just as the first prince said. Ji Tianqing is really still alive. This is unbelievable. He fell into the void and came back alive. It's a miracle. It's worth waiting patiently for so many days." He finally appeared. Many warriors cheered, waving their hands and shouting as they discussed excitedly. Ji Tianqing looked down at the crowd from above. He listened to the warriors' discussion and analyzed a lot of information from it. After a while, the array under his feet started to operate. Chapter 22:17. Seeing the golden teleportation door appear, everyone knew that it was Yuan Zhen who had activated the teleportation array. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and stepped into the portal expressionlessly, disappearing into thin air. In the next moment, he entered the void stage and appeared on the white light disk. Swoosh! The golden light dissipated and his figure appeared. On the disk, martial sages sat in a circle. Everyone sat cross-legged on the ground and closed their eyes to rest, looking bored to death. Sensing the fluctuation in space, everyone opened their eyes and looked at Ji Tianxing. Seeing that he had returned safely, other than looking a little tired, there were no injuries on his body. Everyone frowned in disbelief. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In an instant, more than 30 martial sages stood up and looked at him as if they were looking at a monster. Only Liu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, Jiu Jiu, and the rest were happy and went up to welcome him. Young Master Ji, you're finally back. Liu Baishuang was the first to rush up to him. She looked at him with bright eyes and greeted him excitedly. After that, she looked at Ji Tianxing from head to toe. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was unharmed, she was relieved. Then, Taihao Yunqi and Jiu Jiu came up to him and greeted him with a smile. Tianxing, it's great that you're fine. Tianxing, welcome back safely. We've been waiting for you for a few days. Zhuo Mingqi and Mu Changtian also squeezed over and greeted him excitedly, expressing their worries. Ji Tianxing felt everyone's concern and smiled. He cupped his fists and said, I'm sorry for making everyone worried. Jiu Jiu giggled and glanced at Liu Baishuang, teasing, Tianxing, we're fine, but Holy Emperor Baishuang has suffered a lot these days. She's the one who's worried the most. Liu Baishuang was embarrassed. She looked away and did not dare to look at Ji Tianxing directly. She quickly lowered her head. Ji Tianxing patted Jiu Jiu's head and said with a smile, Jiu Jiu, when did you learn to tease people? Did you learn bad things from your seventh brother? Taihao Yunqi quickly waved his hand and smiled. Young Master Ji, this has nothing to do with me. Everyone immediately burst into laughter, and the atmosphere became much more relaxed. However, on the other side, Qing Shan, Chun Yu, Chao Ying, and the others had displeased expressions, appearing to be very impatient. Hey, Ji Tianxing, how can you let everyone wait for you for so many days? More than 30 martial saints have waited here for you for 7 days. Are you not even going to apologize? Hee, there were some people who were worried about his life and death. I didn't expect him to not care at all. The martial sages of the Heaven Extinction Divine Nation looked at Ji Tianxing with displeasure and spoke in a sarcastic tone. Ji Tianxing, Liu Baishuang, and the others immediately stopped laughing. Ji Tianxing turned his head to look at the young martial sages and said expressionlessly, My life and death naturally have nothing to do with you. As for you all waiting here, that's not my request. What does it have to do with me? Martial Saint Qing Shan immediately frowned and said angrily, Ji Tianxing, how can you say that? You're simply unreasonable. Martial Saint Chen Yu also frowned and said angrily, You're simply treating my kindness as malice. It's better for you to die in the void. Hearing such vicious words, Ji Tianxing, Taihao Yunqi, and the others' faces immediately turned cold. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was about to go crazy, Yuan Zhen, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. Everyone, stop quarreling. This is all because of me. Now that Ji Tianxing has returned safely, I have something to announce. Yuan Zhen was expressionless, and his tone was deep and solemn. Seeing this, everyone knew that there was something important, and they all stopped talking. A few old martial sages and more than 20 young martial sages all looked at Yuan Zhen. Ji Tianxing also temporarily suppressed his anger and looked at Yuan Zhen with a frown. Yuan Zhen raised his right hand and raised a finger. He announced in a vigorous voice, First, I want to announce the ranking of this divine martial sacred assembly. Yuan Chong died in an accident, but Ji Tianxing miraculously survived. Therefore, Ji Tianxing won this battle, and he should be ranked first. Hearing this result, many martial sages were astonished and started discussing among themselves. What's going on? His Highness announced that Ji Tianxing is ranked first? Didn't His Highness set the result before? Why did he change it today? But then again, this is reasonable. After all, Ji Tianxing is still alive. But isn't His Highness hostile to Ji Tianxing? Why did he make this decision? Yuan Zhen turned a deaf ear to the crowd's discussion and raised a second finger. The second matter is that the martial sages who made it to the top 5 have already received their due rewards. Today, I have brought the reward for the first place, and I will personally give it to Ji Tianxing." The martial sages of various countries were surprised again and started discussing in shock and confusion. Yuan Jun was still expressionless, and no one could tell what he was thinking. He slowly raised his left hand and took out a dark purple luxurious treasure box from his spatial ring. Then, he held the exquisite and luxurious treasure box with both hands and personally handed it to Ji Tianxing. "Ji Tianxing, the reward for the first place of the Sacred Assembly is in this treasure box. This is the reward you deserve. Please check it." Yuan Jun's attitude was neither salty nor indifferent, neither servile nor overbearing. Even so, Marshal Saint Qing Shan, Chao Ying, Chun Yu, and the others still felt that it was unbelievable and were even more confused. Ji Tianxing glanced at Yuan Jun and reached out to take the treasure box. He opened it to check. There was a red and white pearl in the middle of the treasure box, and it was shining with a dazzling light. This pearl was only the size of a pigeon's egg, and it was crystal clear with red and white colors. The inside was red like fire, but the surface was wrapped in a layer of dense white light. The entire pearl seemed to have a life of its own, as it exuded a vigorous aura that contained an extremely violent and dangerous aura. Ji Tianxing's eyes were fixed on the pearl, and he couldn't take his eyes off it. Not only was he excited, but his eyes were also filled with a strong sense of surprise. It's it! It's it! This wind and fire pearl is definitely the divine pearl that Yao Yao needs. He shouted excitedly in his heart and could not help but smile. He had seen Yun Yao's divine pearl many times and was very familiar with its appearance and aura. There was no way he would be wrong. At this moment, he only felt that all the danger and pain he had gone through was worth it. After a while, he suppressed his excitement and moved his eyes away from the wind and fire pearl to the ring beside it. It was just an ordinary spatial ring. But when he opened the ring and released his divine sense to explore it, he found that there were mountains of cultivation resources stored in the ring. All kinds of elixirs, talisman materials, spiritual stones, and magic treasures were piled up into a few mountains. Chapter 22:18. Before the Sacred Assembly, Yuan Jun had announced the rewards in front of everyone. The reward for the first place was 300 million cultivation resources and a mysterious gift. Now that he had gotten all the rewards, Ji Tianxing naturally accepted them. When he put the treasure box into his spatial ring, the martial sages in the crowd looked away reluctantly. Everyone's eyes were burning with envy and jealousy. When Ji Tianxing opened the treasure box, the wind-fire divine pearl gave off a mysterious and powerful aura that successfully shocked everyone. Most of the martial sages present were people who knew what was good for them. Just from the light and aura of the divine pearl, everyone could tell that it was a rare treasure. Unfortunately, such a rare treasure had fallen into the hands of Ji Tianxing. Other than envy and jealousy, there was nothing else they could do. They didn't even have the right to look at it. At this time, Yuan Jin announced in a serious voice, "The third thing, I want everyone to be witnesses. I want to apologize to Ji Tianxing in front of everyone." Many martial sages were stunned when they heard this news. Everyone looked at each other, thinking that they had misheard. Especially martial sage Qing Shan, martial sage Chao Ying, and martial sage Xinyu, who were shocked and confused. They couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness, what's going on? Why are you apologizing to him?" "Your First Highness, what right does Ji Tianxing have to make you apologize? What did you do wrong? Why are you apologizing?" Apologizing in front of everyone had always been something that hurt one's self-esteem. Moreover, Yuan Jun was the noble divine son. He was humiliated in front of everyone. The martial sages of the heaven and divine nation also felt ashamed and humiliated. In fact, it wasn't just these young martial sages who were confused. Even the veteran martial sages and the martial sages of the vast divine nation didn't know what was going on. Only Ji Tianxing, Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, and Jiu Jiu knew the reason and looked at Yuan Jun coldly. Yuan Jun looked at Ji Tianxing calmly, cupped his fists respectfully, and said in a serious tone, "I am the host of this sacred assembly, and I should be responsible for everything related to the sacred assembly. However, due to my negligence, An accident occurred in the void platform during the duel between you and Yuan Chong. You and Yuan Chong were swallowed by the void. Yuan Chong died on the spot, and you were left stranded in the void with heavy injuries. I am responsible for causing such serious consequences. This is one of my crimes. After the incident, I didn't receive a painful lesson. I only cared about myself and didn't think of rescuing her in time. This was the second sin. Fortunately, Holy Emperor Bai Shuang, Taihao Yunqi, and Taihao Jujiu reminded me, and at the request of the three martial sages, I brought people into the void to search. I'm even more thankful that the heavens are protecting you and that you didn't perish in the void. I was able to successfully find you and prevent you from making an even bigger mistake. After he finished speaking, Yuan Jun bowed deeply towards Ji Tianxing and said in a sincere tone, Yuan Jun knows that he has committed a grave sin and has deeply disappointed young Master Ji and the martial saints. Therefore, Yuan Jun sincerely apologizes to young Master Ji. I hope young Master Ji can be magnanimous and forgive Yuan Jun's mistake. Yuan Jun's sincere words and tone immediately made many martial sages respect him, especially the martial saints of the heaven and divine nation. Not only did they not feel humiliated, but they also looked proud. The crowd even discussed in secret. They were all very impressed by Yuan Jun's magnanimity. The few veteran martial saints also smiled with gratification and nodded their heads in praise. Taihao Yunqi, Jujiu, and Lu Baishuang also looked satisfied. The anger and dissatisfaction that had accumulated in their hearts also dissipated. It didn't matter why Yuan Jun apologized in public. Now that he had taken action, it could be said that he knew his mistake and could change. Everyone thought that Ji Tianxing would not pursue the matter and that this matter would be over. However, what Yuan Jun and the others didn't expect was that Ji Tianxing looked at Yuan Jun with a mocking gaze and a cold smile. Ha ha, Yuan Jun, your acting is very good. While laughing coldly, Ji Tianxing even clapped his hands. The martial saint's expressions changed. Yuan Jun also frowned. A trace of shame and anger flashed in his eyes. However, he immediately suppressed his anger and asked calmly, May I ask young Master Ji, are you not satisfied with Yuan Jun's apology? Ji Tianxing sneered. Do you think I should be satisfied? You seem to be sincerely apologizing, but in fact, you are inverting right and wrong. You are completely shirking responsibility. When Yuan Chong and I fought in public, a void crack suddenly appeared in the void. You dare to say that it was an accident? This is clearly your scheme. You want to kill two birds with one stone and take the opportunity to get rid of me and Yuan Chong. Yuan Jun's body suddenly shook. A trace of anger and killing intent flashed in his eyes. However, he endured it and quickly pretended to be innocent. He said with righteous indignation, Slander. You are maliciously slandering me. Yuan Chong is my brother. How can I harm him? Ji Tianxing sneered contemptuously. Yes, Yuan Chong is your brother. However, he is also one of the successors of the Divine Master. His talent and comprehension are second only to yours. He is the most threatening divine son to you. Moreover, you hate me to the bone. In order to get rid of me, you did not hesitate to sacrifice Yuan Chong's life. Even if you brought Qin Zheng and the Sky City Lord into the void, you would not let me go. You still wanted to kill me. Fortunately, I was strong enough to kill Qin Zheng and the Sky City Lord. I also severely injured you. However, in the end, all my efforts were in vain. I let you escape. Ji Tianxing's words were like a bolt from the blue. Instantly, all the martial saints present were dumbfounded. Everyone widened their eyes in shock and looked at Ji Tianxing and Yuan Jun in disbelief. For a moment, the white light disk was silent. The expressions of the more than 30 martial saints were very subtle and complicated. Even Yuan Jun did not expect that Ji Tianxing would be so daring to tell the truth in front of everyone. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He hurriedly sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing and shouted angrily, Ji Tianxing, are you crazy? You dare to say these words? Ji Tianxing did not send a voice transmission. He asked in a cold voice, "You dare to do it? Why can't I dare to say it? What you should really apologize to me is because of this matter." Yuan Jun was completely dumbfounded. He glared at Ji Tianxing. His mind was blank. Previously, he was wondering if Ji Tianxing had compromised with Divine Father and agreed to serve Tianju Divine Nation. But now, it seemed that was not the case. Yuan Jun was confused. What was going on? Why could Ji Tianxing come back alive? Why did Divine Father personally issue an order for him to apologize to Ji Tianxing? Yuan Jun could not figure it out. At this moment, a cold and dignified middle-aged man's voice sounded in his mind. "Yuan Jun, why are you still in a daze? Don't argue with Ji Tianxing. Don't waste time with him. Quickly apologize to him." This voice was angry and anxious. Yuan Jun was very familiar with it. His body suddenly shook as if he was struck by lightning. He revealed a look of disbelief. Chapter 22:19. Yuan Jun had never thought that martial god Tianju would personally send him a voice transmission. He knew that martial god Tianju's real body was in seclusion in the Divine Kingdom. Usually, only one of his Divine Soul doppelgangers was in charge of government affairs and would not leave the Divine Kingdom. Now, it was most likely his Divine Soul doppelgangers who were secretly observing the Void platform. Thinking of this, Yuan Jun vaguely guessed something and suddenly had a bad feeling. "Father God, what happened to you? What the hell happened?" These thoughts appeared in his mind. He wanted to ask martial god Tianju with his divine sense, but he could not do so. Full of helplessness, he could only suppress the humiliation and anger and slowly looked up at Ji Tianxing. "Ji Tianxing, you? Enough. Ruthless." He stared at Ji Tianxing with fire shooting out of his eyes. He gritted his teeth and shouted coldly, Yuan Jun, admit my defeat today." "Ji Tianxing, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have schemed against you, and I shouldn't have killed you." Yuan Jun's voice was low and hoarse. It was as if he had used up all his strength and courage to shout these words. Then, without looking at Ji Tianxing, he turned around and walked to the center of the round plate. He just wanted to leave the Void platform immediately. The surrounding martial sages were still in shock and astonishment. Many of them had not come to their senses and were still unwilling to believe Ji Tianxing's words. However, when they saw Yuan Jun's reaction, they knew that Ji Tianxing was not lying. Indeed, Yuan Jun had schemed against Ji Tianxing and Yuan Chong to kill two birds with one stone. Even after entering the Void, he did not go to search for Ji Tianxing, but to kill him. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing was strong enough to kill Qin Zheng and the sky-gazing city lord. Only then did he manage to escape. However, why did Yuan Jun apologize to Ji Tianxing? This was the most puzzling thing to everyone. However, no matter what, Yuan Jun had schemed against Ji Tianxing and even killed his fourth brother, Yuan Chong. This was basically a fact. Many martial sages' expressions changed. They no longer looked at Yuan Jun with gratification and admiration. Instead, they looked at him with caution, disgust, contempt, and disdain. Especially Tai Hao Yunqi, Jiu Jiu, and Lu Baishuang. How could they let go of this opportunity to beat a dog in the water? "I can't believe that the grand divine son of the heaven's divine nation is so vicious that he even wanted to kill his fourth brother." Tai Hao Yunqi shouted in shock. He stopped Yuan Jun and asked him, "Yuan Jun, how can you be so narrow-minded and vicious to such an extent?" Yuan Jun was stopped by him. He immediately raised his head and glared at him with red eyes. He shouted angrily, "What does it have to do with you? Get out of here." Jiu Jiu and Lu Baishuang also opened their mouths to denounce his evil deeds. "Jun, I've long seen through your hypocritical and despicable true face. You've deceived so many people all these years. Now that the truth has been revealed and your sins have been exposed, shouldn't you repent? Despicable and shameless bastard. You insisted that it was an accident, but I refuse to believe it. I didn't expect it to be so. Young Master Ji has no enmity with you. Why do you want to kill him? How can you be so vicious?" Yuan Jun's mind and consciousness were filled with doubt, confusion, and anger. He was about to lose his mind. Now that he was being questioned by Jiu Jiu and Lu Baishuang in front of everyone, he was enraged. Glaring at the two of them, he roared, "You two bitches, if you dare to make any more noise, I'll kill you." He shouted coldly. His face was distorted and terrifying. His whole body was emitting a terrifying, murderous intent. Jiao and Lu Baishuang were oppressed by the murderous intent. They took a few steps back with pale faces. The few young martial sages of the Heaven's divine nation who were closer to Yuan Zhen also retreated in fear. In everyone's eyes, Yuan Zhen was no different from an angry mad dog. Everyone looked at Yuan Zhen with a complicated expression. They found it hard to believe that the once elegant and cultured eldest son of God would turn into such a ferocious person. Even Qing Shan, Chen Yu, and the martial sages of the Heaven's divine nation were embarrassed and disappointed. They didn't dare to approach Yuan Zhen. Chaoing had always admired Yuan Zhen. She was impressed by his talent and demeanor. But now, Chaoing looked at Yuan Zhen with tears in her eyes. Her expression and eyes were a little dazed. Her mind was blank. She couldn't believe that Yuan Zhen, who was so outstanding that he was almost perfect, was just a hypocrite. He, who showed his true face, was so ferocious and terrifying. He was cruel and vicious. Silently, something in Chao Ying's heart was broken. 2 drops of tears fell from the corners of her eyes and silently streaked across her face. Swoosh! Yuan Zhen, who was almost crazy, rushed into the golden door as if he was escaping. His figure immediately disappeared. The white light disk was still silent. Many martial sages looked at each other and shook their heads with regret. They couldn't help but sigh. No one could believe that things had turned out like this. Yuan Chong was dead. Yuan Zhen was almost crazy and lost his reputation. And the biggest winner was undoubtedly Ji Tianqing. Not only did he win first place and obtain the most mysterious rare treasure, he also humiliated Yuan Zhen in front of everyone. Many young martial sages didn't dare to look at him directly. They only dared to glance at him secretly. There was a hint of fear in everyone's eyes. After this incident, none of the martial sacred realm experts present would dare to provoke him. Even a noble and powerful first divine son, Yuan Zhen, had been defeated by him. Who would dare to seek death? After everyone was silent for a while, Xingshan martial sage stroked his beard and sighed with a complicated expression. He was the first to leave with Chaoing. Then, Wenren and Jiuxing, Yin Shao Palace Master, Granny Yulong, and the others stepped into the golden teleportation door. Lu Baishuang quietly pulled Ji Tianqing's sleeve and whispered, "Young Master Ji, we can't stay here for long. Let's go." Ji Tianqing nodded. He looked up at the void with deep meaning and nodded slightly in a certain direction. Then, he left with Lu Baishuang and the others. Of course, Qing Shan, Chen Yu, and the other young martial sages watched him leave coldly. There was a hint of hatred in their eyes. After this incident, the martial sages of heaven hated and feared Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! In a flash, Ji Tianqing, Lu Baishuang, Taihao Yunqi, and the others appeared in the square in the city. They stood in 2 groups and cupped their fists to each other and said goodbye to each other. Taihao Yunqi looked at Ji Tianqing and said sincerely, "Tianqing, after this incident, you and heaven in divine nation are like fire and water. You have to be careful." Jiujiu looked at him with burning eyes and said, "Yuan Zhen's evil deeds have been exposed by you. He will definitely lose his reputation. He will definitely hate you and will not let this go." Ji Tianqing nodded and cupped his fist to return the greeting. "Yunqi, Jiujiu, thank you for your concern. However, I've already made preparations and plans. You don't have to worry." Taihao Yunqi nodded slightly and said with a smile, "If that's the case, then we will take our leave. If you have the chance in the future, remember to visit us at Mount God Bestowment." Chapter 22:20. Taihao Yunqi left with Jiujiu. The young martial saints of the vast divine kingdom also left one after another. Ji Tianqing, Lu Baishuang, and the others didn't stay in Sky City either. Under the gaze of hundreds of thousands of martial artists, they flew across the sky and soon disappeared into the horizon. Since he had obtained the Wind Fire Divine Pearl, Ji Tianxing naturally had to return to Luotian Mountain and give it to Yun Yao as soon as possible. On the Void platform, the remaining martial saints all left. After a while, the white light disk was empty and returned to silence. Then, the golden light portal also disappeared. In the alternate space, martial god Luo Shui held Tianju's clone and watched everything calmly. The highly anticipated divine martial sacred assembly had finally ended, although there were many twists and turns in the process. Fortunately, the result was as martial god Luo Shui had expected. Tianju's clone struggled a few times, but couldn't break free from martial god Luo Shui's grasp. His face was as cold as ice as he gnashed his teeth and shouted, "Luo Shui, it's over, and I fulfilled my promise. Why don't you let me go? I've tolerated you to the extreme, and you even ruined my son Yuan Zhen's reputation. If you dare to break the promise, I won't forgive you." Martial god Luo Shui didn't intend to let him go. He said indifferently, "You did have a good intention when you held the divine martial sacred assembly. Therefore, I don't object to the martial saints of the Luo Shui divine kingdom participating. Unfortunately, after thousands of years, the divine martial sacred assembly has become dirty and shady, and it has become a tool for you to win over the martial saints of various races. Even your sons have imitated your despicable shamelessness. Now, you and your sons have only yourselves to blame for ending up like this." Tianju's clone clenched his teeth, and his face darkened with anger. His eyes were scarlet red. Surging murderous aura accumulated in his chest, ready to explode at any moment. He was extremely angry and secretly swore that after this, he would take revenge 100-fold. No matter the price, he would kill Ji Tianxing and martial god Luo Shui and flatten the entire Luo Shui divine kingdom. However, he could only endure for now and escape first. Luo Shui martial god stared at the sky and said indifferently, "Tianjue, I know what you're thinking. Your clone was captured by me and threatened by me to make such a humiliating decision. With your personality, you would never let me and Ji Tianxing go. You even wanted to destroy the Luo Shui divine nation. Don't deny it. If you don't have these thoughts, then you wouldn't be you." Tianju's clone's body stiffened, and he had a bad premonition. He asked cautiously, "Luo Shui, what do you mean? What do you want?" Luo Shui, martial god, looked down at him and said coldly, "The world has always known me as the most gentle and kind god master. Other than being aloof and pure, he seemed to have no ambition or domineering means. But today, I'm sorry, you must die." Her tone was calm and indifferent, without any hatred or anger, but it made Tianju's doppelganger feel cold from the bottom of his heart. His expression instantly changed as he cursed out in rage, "Luo Shui, you bitch, you actually want to break the contract? Are you crazy? You have to think clearly. Once you destroy this clone of mine, we'll be mortal enemies." Luo Shui, martial god, looked at him indifferently and asked back, "Even if I don't destroy your clone, are we enemies? Could it be that you will fulfill your promise and not attack Ji Tianxing again? He. At our level, we don't have to lie and deceive each other." Tianju's clone trembled with anger, his eyes spitting fire as he roared, "Luo Shui, I think you're really crazy. In order to protect Ji Tianxing, you actually disregarded the consequences. You'll definitely regret it. Even if you destroy my clone, it won't affect anything. The day my real body comes out of seclusion will be the day you die." Luo Shui, martial god, chuckled and said indifferently, "If I destroy your clone, at least you won't be able to hurt him for the time being. Even if you succeed and your real body comes out of seclusion, it will be 20 years later. At that time, I'm afraid the situation will be different." Tianju's clone was completely dumbfounded. His eyes widened, revealing monstrous hatred, and he roared hysterically, "Luo Shui, you crazy woman. You're simply unreasonable. In order to protect him for 20 years, you actually disregarded the contract and didn't hesitate to become mortal enemies with me. You wait. One day I'll make you kneel down and repent." Luo Shui, martial god, glanced at him and said in a cold tone, "Then you can look forward to that day." Then, her right palm lit up with dazzling, icy blue brilliance, condensing into a huge seal, enveloping Tianju's clone and crushing him fiercely. The seal was made up of hundreds of ancient seal characters, and it contained extraordinary power. Tianju's clone was already seriously injured. How could he resist Luo Shui, martial gods, at full suppression? Cracking sounds could be heard as Tianju's doppelganger continued to crumble. His power was also rapidly dissipating. Luo Shui, I'll definitely kill you, definitely." Before completely collapsing, Tianju's clone roared furiously, and his voice shook the heavens. After 10 breaths, he completely collapsed, turning into billions of starlight spots. Immediately after, the icy blue seal dispersed the light spots as well. Tianju's clone completely disappeared and no longer existed. Only then did Luo Shui, martial god, retract her palm, turn around, and step into the void, leaving silently. Although the divine martial sacred assembly had ended and all the experts had left one after another, the more than 300,000 martial artists in the square, after discussing for a while, also left one after another. However, at this moment, an explosive piece of news spread throughout the square. Previously, when Ji Tianxing and Yuan Cheng fought on the Void platform, the accident that suddenly happened was actually not an accident. The huge void crack and the terrifying void storm were all deliberately designed by eldest divine Sun Yuanzhen. The reason why Yuanzhen did this was to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, killing Ji Tianxing and Yuan Cheng at the same time. Ji Tianxing had a grudge with him, and Yuan Cheng was also the divine son who was the most threatening to him, so he was so ruthless. Yuan Cheng died on the spot, and Ji Tianxing was wandering in the void, his whereabouts unknown. Therefore, Yuan Zhen brought the Divine Guard's supervisor Qin Zheng and the Sky City Lord personally into the void to kill them all. However, Ji Tianxing's strength was strong. He killed Qin Zheng and the Sky City Lord, and even seriously injured Yuan Zhen. Just now, Yuan Zhen apologized and repented to Ji Tianxing in front of all the martial sages on the Void platform. This sudden news instantly exploded in the square and quickly spread throughout Wangtian City. Everyone found it hard to believe. How could the noble and elegant eldest divine, Sun Yuanzhen, be such a sinister and despicable villain? But this news was absolutely true, and all the martial sages present could prove it. For a time, the entire Sky City was in an uproar. Everyone was immersed in shock, crazily discussing and spreading this matter. Chapter 22-21. Half a month later, Ji Tianxing, Lu Baishuang, Zhuo Mingqi, Mu Changtian, and the others returned to Luo Shui God Nation. The 4 of them looked travel-worn. After returning to Luo Shui God Nation, the 4 of them went their separate ways. Lu Baishuang and the others returned to their respective empires. Ji Tianxing went straight to Luotian Mountain. 3 days later, he finally returned to Luotian Mountain in the evening. Under the faint golden sunset, Luotian Mountain was as tranquil and ethereal as usual. White clouds wrapped around the mountain peak. Flocks of birds and spirit beasts danced around the mountain peak. The many buildings and palaces on the mountain peak were also shining faintly. Ji Tianxing landed on the square on the mountain peak. Many guards and disciples saw him and immediately bowed. He did not waste any time and went straight to Grandma Long's residence to report. Half an hour later, he met Granny Long in her study. Grandma Long was handling official business. She seemed to be in a good mood. There was even a faint smile on her lips. Hearing the footsteps, she quickly put down the memorial in her hand and turned to look at Ji Tianxing at the door. "Tianxing, you're finally back." Grandma Long's old face showed a sincere smile. She stood up and welcomed him with a heart full of gratification. Ji Tianxing nodded at her and greeted her. He sat down in front of her. Grandma Long ordered a maid to make tea. She looked at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze and said, "Tianxing, when you went to the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly, I was worried every day. I've already heard about what happened in Wang Tian City from the spies. I did not expect that you would encounter so many troubles and twists in Skyview City this time. Fortunately, you turned the misfortune into a blessing. Everything was easily resolved. Not only that, you also took first place in the Sacred Assembly and ruined that damn Yuan Zhen's reputation. Now, Yuan Zhen's ugly deeds have already spread across the entire continent. Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. Since Grandma already knew about it, I won't say more. Just as Granny had expected, the pearl that Martial God Tianju had obtained in the heavenly Windfire layer was the Windfire Divine Pearl that Yao Yao needed. I've already brought the god, or back. I'll go look for Yao Yao later. Granny Long's smile grew brighter as she nodded and said, "That's great. Now that you can get the Flaming Wind Divine Bead, all the danger and suffering you went through before will be worth it. All right, Yin Yao's strength has improved recently. In the month after you left, she went through another heavenly tribulation and is now at the 8th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. With the Wind Fire Deity Pearl, her breakthrough to the Martial Sage realm is almost guaranteed. It's just a matter of time." Ji Tianxing was also deeply surprised and said in disbelief, "Yao Yao's strength has increased so quickly? Looks like the power of the Divine Pearl is indeed terrifying." Granny Long smiled and said, "All right, I'm already very grateful that you came to report to me right away after a long journey. Don't waste time. Go back and see Yin Yao. Although she has been cultivating in seclusion, she knows that you participated in the Sacred Assembly. She is very worried about you." Ji Tianxing nodded and was about to get up and leave. However, he suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but ask, "Granny, did the Divine Master come out of seclusion long ago?" Granny Long was stunned for a moment. She looked at him deeply and nodded. "That's right. When you went to Wantian City, the Divine Master had already come out of seclusion." Ji Tianxing thought to himself and asked doubtfully, "The Divine Master coming out of seclusion is such a big thing. How could there be no news at all?" Granny Long revealed a meaningful smile and explained, "The Divine Master's wisdom is incomparable to ordinary people. She already knew that the current situation was complicated, so she deliberately hid the news." Ji Tianxing was silent for a moment and asked again, "Then, has the Divine Master come back? Did she say anything?" Granny Long didn't hide and answered honestly, 10 days ago, the Divine Master returned to the Divine Kingdom. She did say something to me. The Divine Master said to let you cultivate in peace and take care of your own affairs. You don't need to worry about the Divine Kingdom of Tianju." Ji Tianxing was stunned for a moment and immediately guessed something. He couldn't help but feel warm in his heart. Of course, she knows that Martial God Tianju and I are like fire and water. He will definitely take revenge. Since she said this, it means that she has already taken care of the future trouble. She won't let Martial God Tianju threaten me. Could it be that, after she threatened Martial God Tianju, she still destroyed his divine soul avatar? It's hard to believe that she changed her gentle nature and acted so decisively. Ji Tianxing thought silently, and his heart was filled with many emotions. After he came back to his senses, he bowed to Granny Long and left the study. Not long after, he returned to the Cloud Water Palace. Golden Dragon, who was guarding the door, quickly bowed to greet him. When he entered the living room, Black Eagle also came to greet him. After a few words of concern, he wanted to help him bathe and change his clothes. After all, he looked travel-worn and was not in good spirits. Ji Tianxing declined Black Eagle's kindness and entered Yun Yao's secret room alone. In the secret room, full of spiritual energy, Yun Yao was sitting cross-legged on a futon made of supreme-grade spiritual jade. She closed her eyes and cultivated. After not seeing her for more than 20 days, her strength and aura had indeed increased by several times. Ji Tianxing used his divine sense to check and found that she had really reached the 8th level of the Crossing Calamity realm and was trying to break through to the 9th level. He slowed down his pace and walked to Yin Yao and sat down in front of her. He didn't want to wake her up. However, Yin Yao didn't enter a deep level of cultivation and immediately sensed his aura. She opened her eyes and looked at Ji Tianxing with clear eyes. Seeing that Ji Tianxing had returned safely, she heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She revealed a gratified look and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. Tianxing, you're finally back. This time, you went to the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly and went through so many twists and turns. It's great that you can return safely. Ji Tianxing's spirit also relaxed. He naturally revealed a gentle smile and stretched out his hand to hold Yun Yao's hands. When he was wandering outside, no matter what he experienced, his spirit was always tense. He had to remain calm and vigilant at all times. Only when he was reunited with Yun Yao and his child could his mind truly relax. No matter how many trials and tribulations he went through, as long as he saw his wife and child safe, everything was worth it. He looked at Yun Yao with a gentle gaze and said in a gentle voice, Yao Yao, the pearl that martial god Tianju obtained in the heavenly wind and fire layer was indeed a wind and fire divine pearl. Although he was a martial god, he also misjudged and didn't understand the true profundity of the wind and fire divine pearl. Although there were some twists and turns in the process, I still brought this divine pearl back in the end. As he spoke, he took out a treasure box from his space ring and took out the wind and fire divine pearl. He handed it to Yun Yao. The divine pearl was only the size of a pigeon's egg, but it was as heavy as a mountain. It contained the power of the heavenly wind and heavenly fire that could destroy the heavens and earth. It emitted an extremely violent aura. Chapter 22:22. Yun Yao stared at the wind fire deity pearl. She was excited and her eyes sparkled. She reached out and took the deity pearl. She held it in her palm and looked at it intently. This is indeed one of the deity pearls that I need. The wind fire deity pearl is even stronger than the earth spiritual pearl. This is great. With this wind fire deity pearl, I am confident that I will be able to break through to the martial sage realm. Even the glazed fire dragon will be able to break through to the martial sage realm with the help of this deity pearl. At this point, Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianxing with a face full of gratitude. Her voice was slightly choked as she said, Husband, thank you. You have done so much for me, but I can't do anything to help you. Ji Tianxing patted her hand and gestured for her to keep the wind fire deity pearl. He smiled and comforted her. Since we are husband and wife, there is no need to thank me. Now that you are pregnant, you can give birth to Qinshan and Yiya. Nurturing and teaching them is already the greatest contribution you can make. When the two children were mentioned, a happy smile appeared on Yun Yao's face. She lowered her head to look at her slightly swollen belly and said in a gentle voice, Qinshan and Yiya are both very smart and sensible. Before they were even born, they already had extraordinary strength. Their talent is rare in the world. It is also our fortune to have two such outstanding children in this life. When she spoke of the two children, Yun Yao was proud of them. She was radiating a motherly glow. Ji Tianxing felt the same way. He reached out and caressed her belly. He smiled and said, I wonder when the two children will be born. Yun Yao thought for a while and smiled. She shook her head and said, From the looks of it, it will take a few more years. So long? Ji Tianxing was surprised. He smiled and said, Don't you want to see your parents sooner? Qinshan and Yiya were sleeping and did not seem to hear him. Naturally, they did not reply. Ji Tianxing chatted with Yun Yao for a while before he got up to leave. Yao Yao, quickly refine the wind fire deity pearl and break through to the martial sage realm. I will not delay your cultivation any further. I still have some matters to attend to and need to rush back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I won't stay to accompany you. While I'm done with my business, I'll come back to see you. Yun Yao nodded and comforted him softly. Husband, go ahead and do your work. You don't have to worry about me. Now that the chaos of the demon race has been quelled and the situation on the continent is stable, you have to seize the time to cultivate. Ji Tianxing patiently listened to her advice, then got up and left the secret room. After resting for a day in the Cloud Water Palace, he left the Luotian Mountain alone the next morning and rushed towards the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He did not lie when he told Yun Yao that he needed to return to Tianzhu Mountain. He really did have something to do. The illusory spirit star nucleus that he had previously absorbed was still stored in the sword world. He had to send the ethereal star nucleus back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains as soon as possible and put it into the star divine furnace for smelting. According to his estimation, it would take at least a few years for the star nucleus to be smelted in the star divine furnace before it could be used. At that time, he would be able to use the ethereal star nucleus to smelt the burial of Heaven's sword and improve the quality of the burial of Heaven's sword. Ji Tianxing rushed at full speed and arrived at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains 2 days later. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains was still the holy land of martial arts with abundant spiritual energy. The entire holy mountain was peaceful. Ji Tianxing flew to the top of the mountain and looked down at the entire holy mountain and the training grounds. Many of the houses and palaces had not changed, and the training grounds were still clean and tidy. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the number of disciples and guards living on the mountain peak seemed to have increased. Obviously, the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was very good, and it was developing rapidly. Ji Tianxing was deeply gratified and landed in front of the gate of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. When the guards on both sides of the gate saw his return, they hurriedly knelt down and bowed respectfully. Ji Tianxing nodded with satisfaction and signaled the guards to dispense with the formalities. Then, he looked at the captain of the guards and asked, "Where is Huang Longren?" The captain of the guards hurriedly replied, reporting to young Master Ji, "The great immortal brought 2 elders to patrol the sect and the city yesterday. According to the usual practice, the great immortal will return by tomorrow evening at the latest." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and signaled the captain of the guards to leave. He instructed, "When he returns, send someone to report the news. I have something to ask him." After saying that, he stepped into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and returned to his residence. There were guards guarding the inside and outside of the room, and there were maids who cleaned the room until it was spotless. Jibai and Shohei were not there. Obviously, they followed his last order and did not continue to guard here. Ji Tianxing passed through the room of his residence and went straight into the secret room. He opened the secret passage in the corner of the secret room and flew down the passage, entering the divine star furnace. The huge divine star furnace had long been filled with endless divine star fire. What he saw was a silver sea, the turbulent sea of fire rolling endlessly, exuding a terrifying heat. Ji Tianxing was in the turbulent sea of fire, but it was as comfortable as soaking in a hot spring, indescribably comfortable. Originally, he was mentally exhausted and travel-worn. After soaking in the divine star fire for a while, he became energetic and full of energy. Even the hidden diseases and minor injuries on his body were quickly healed by the power of the stars. He crossed the turbulent sea of fire and came to the corner of the divine star furnace to check on Qianyu and the Black Dragon. Qianyu and the Black Dragon's strength had greatly improved, especially the Black Dragon. After being tempered thousands of times in the divine star furnace, the dragon's body had long been incomparably strong and was no longer riddled with scars. It had already cultivated the star transformation art to great success and could smoothly devour the power of the stars. Qianyu still had a leisurely look, relying on the protection of the divine artifact. It was resting with its eyes closed. When Ji Tianxing approached it, it immediately woke up, opened its silver eyes, and looked at Ji Tianxing with bright eyes. "Old Ji, why are you back?" Qianyu got up and flew in front of Ji Tianxing excitedly, and asked, "You left us here and let us cultivate in seclusion for a few years. Why didn't you come see us?" As it spoke, it stretched out its claws and pointed at the black dragon in the corner, and said pitifully, "Look at that dumb dragon. After cultivating in the divine star furnace for a few years, it has long been burnt black like charcoal, covered in cuts and bruises, and on the verge of death." Ji Tianxing looked at Qianyu with a faint smile and stretched out his hand to knock on its head, and said jokingly, "Don't complain to me. The black dragon is already as black as charcoal. How could it be burnt? Besides, it is strong enough now, and can already withstand the tempering of the divine star fire. What are you trying to do by acting pitiful in front of me? Qianyu rolled its eyes and said pitifully, Old G, the dumb dragon and I are strong enough. There is not much point in continuing to stay in the divine star furnace. Why don't we leave the furnace and go out with you, and help you solve your problems? Chapter 22-23. Qianyu was seen through by Ji Tianxing, but it didn't feel embarrassed. It hugged Ji Tianxing's arm and didn't let go, pretending to be pitiful and begging. Old Ji, you once said that cultivating in seclusion can't help us achieve the divine art, let alone advance by leaps and bounds. Only by practicing in real battles can we grow quickly. We have built the foundation. Now, we need to take risks and fight in real battles. Ji Tianxing couldn't stand its coaxing and pestering. He nodded and said, Okay, you continue to cultivate. I still have things to do. Well, I need to go out. I will take you out. Qianyu's wish was fulfilled. It let go of Shiyan's arm and said with a smile, Okay, old Ji, you have to keep your promise. Ji Tianxing didn't care about it anymore. He turned around and flew to the depths of the star divine furnace, landing on the Tianzhong tall star torch. He looked around and frowned. The star divine furnace is only 100 miles wide. The illusory spirit star nucleus has been shrunk 100 times, but it's still 200 miles long. How can I put it in the furnace? The illusory spirit star nucleus was twice as big as the star divine furnace. If he didn't use some tricks, he couldn't put it in, let alone smelt it. Ji Tianxing frowned and pondered for a while. Then, he came up with a solution. The star divine furnace wasn't a real furnace. It was a super formation. He just needed to slightly change the structure of the formation to double the size of the star divine furnace. Therefore, he hurriedly cast a spell, forming white formation seals and injecting them into the star torch. He busied himself for 6 hours and cast more than 20,000 seals before he finally managed to change the structure of the formation. The star divine furnace, which was filled by the star flame, quickly expanded to more than 200 miles wide. In this way, the illusory spirit star nucleus could be put in. However, the star flame that filled the entire furnace could only fill half of it now. Ji Tianxing took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven, opened the Sword World, and used the capturing technique to take out the huge illusory spirit star nucleus. Swoosh! The 200-mile-long diamond-shaped star nucleus appeared in the star divine furnace. This stone, which was as black as ink, directly filled the star divine furnace. The surging star divine flame was also forced to spread out, stirring up terrifying waves. Black Dragon and Qianyu, who were cultivating in the sea of fire, were awakened by the huge wave. Both of them flew to Ji Tianxing's side and asked him about the situation. Old Ji, what are you doing? Wow, such a big piece of ore. That's not right. It doesn't look like an ore, but a meteorite. Qianyu and Hei Long stared at the ethereal star nucleus with curious and surprised expressions. Ji Tianxing glanced at them and immediately came up with an idea. With a serious face, he said, This is a star crystal core I got from outer space. This was no ordinary meteorite. Instead, it was the crystallization of a star. Not only was it tough and powerful, but it also contained the power of the entire star. The two of you have been cultivating in the star divine furnace for a few years. If you continue to absorb the star divine fire, your progress will not be obvious enough. Therefore, from now on, the two of you will control the star divine fire to refine this star core. The energy from the star core will help you to increase your strength quickly. The black dragon's eyes lit up, and he nodded his head excitedly. That's great. I can feel that my strength has been increasing at a slower speed recently. I don't know when I will be able to break through. I didn't expect Old G to get Star Core. This is amazing. With this Star Core, my strength will increase by leaps and bounds. Maybe in less than 2 years, I will be able to break through to the martial sage realm. The black dragon said excitedly. He could not help but stretch out his dragon claws and touch the black Star Core. Qianyu was suspicious. He looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, Old Ji, why do I feel that there is a trick? You are definitely not helping us to increase our strength. In my opinion, you most likely want us to be your coolies and help you refine this star core, right? Humph. Damn little fox. Ji Tianxing scolded in his heart. However, he did not admit it and quickly shook his head to deny it. Qianyu, do I look like that kind of person to you? Do I look like that kind of person? Qianyu nodded his head and said firmly, You don't look like that kind of person. You are. Ji Tianxing could not help but roll his eyes at Qianyu and said, No matter what you think, this is a task that I have given you. You must complete it. When the two of you are able to refine this star core into a silvery white crystal, the task will be completed. The black dragon did not think much of it and nodded his head in agreement. He then flew around the star core and examined it carefully. Qianyu looked at Ji Tianxing warily and asked, Old Ji, we can complete this task, but you have to tell me, how long will it take? Ji Tianxing smirked and said casually, 7 to 8 years at most. 2 to 3 years at least. What? Qianyu's expression changed, and he looked like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He jumped in front of Ji Tianxing and threw a tantrum. Old Ji, you detestable liar. You just promised me that you would bring me out to explore the world. You forgot your promise in the blink of an eye, and now you want me to work for you for 7 to 8 years? Old Ji, I advise you to be kinder. Otherwise, I will tell Yunniao that you cheated me and the Black Dragon and exploited us. Ji Tianxing was not angry or anxious. He smiled and held Qianyu's claws. Don't be anxious. 7 to 8 years is the longest time. I will teach you a skill to refine this star core and increase your strength at the same time. As long as you do not slack off and work hard, I guarantee that you will complete the task in 3 years. Furthermore, you will break through to the martial sage realm within 3 years. When the little black dragon heard this, he immediately became spirited and expectantly asked, Old Ji, is what you said true? What skill is it? Teach me. Qianyu could not help but glare at him and scold him. Stupid dragon. Can you be any more stupid? You still have to stay here for 3 years. Don't you want to go to the Luotian Mountain and see your fiancée, Azure? The black dragon was stunned. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, It's only 3 years. If I can break through to the martial sage realm, it will be worth it. As for Azure, when did she become my fiancée? I haven't seen her for a few years, and I have almost forgotten what she looks like. Furthermore, I have already thought about it. I will only go out to explore the world when I reach the martial sage realm. I don't want to be bullied and embarrass old G. You. Qianyu was choked by the black dragon's words. He was so angry that he could only stare, but there was nothing he could do. Ji Tianxing smiled and patted his head. Qianyu, you have to understand my good intentions. I am doing this for your own good. Cultivate well. I will wait for the day when you break through to the martial sage realm. Chapter 22-24. The 2 balls of dazzling white light contained a vast amount of information and recorded a skill art. The dazzling light entered Qianyu and the black dragon's minds and immediately released a vast amount of information. Both of them were dizzy from the shock and quickly closed their eyes. They obediently lay on the star nucleus and silently refined it. Ji Tianxing revealed a wisp of a satisfied smile when he saw this scene, and then he turned around and left the stellar divine furnace. He believed that with Qianyu and the black dragon's strength, as long as they mastered the skill art, they would be able to refine the star nucleus in 2 years. Moreover, their strength would increase by leaps and bounds, and they would break through to the martial sage realm. After leaving the star divine furnace, Ji Tianxing returned to the secret chamber. He sat alone in the middle of the secret chamber and waved his hand to activate the array of the secret chamber. Instantly, the secret chamber was filled with spiritual energy. In his mind, the voice of the burial of heaven rang. I know that you want to refine the star nucleus as soon as possible and help me reach the empty god rank. However, this is not something that can be done in 2 to 3 years. Why did you lie to those 2? That little fox is very cunning. Aren't you afraid that it will resent you? Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. He explained, Actually, I did not lie to them. I did it for their own good. Although there are many conditions to upgrade you to a divine weapon, and refining the star nucleus is only one of them. However, what I can do now is to fulfill the conditions that I have. The current situation seems calm, but I have a bad premonition that there will be even greater turmoil in the future. Qian Yu and the Black Dragon will not benefit much from following me. Instead, they will delay the best time to cultivate. Now, the most important thing for them to do is to cultivate diligently and increase their strength. At this point, Ji Tianqing added, "Of course, it's the same for me. I will also be cultivating in seclusion for a period of time." The Burial of Heaven guessed his thoughts and asked in a low voice, "Are you referring to the Heaven End God Nation and the North Underworld Mountain? You and the Demon Tribe are irreconcilable enemies. Now, you are also enemies with the Heaven End God Nation. If you do not improve your strength quickly, I am afraid that it will be difficult to deal with the revenge of these two forces." Ji Tianqing nodded and didn't say anything else. Actually, there was another thought in his mind, but he didn't say it out loud. That thought was about you and the non-human kind, but it was still vague. He wasn't sure. 10 breaths later, the secret chamber was completely quiet. Ji Tianqing closed his eyes and formed a series of hand seals to cultivate the 7th level of the Sword Soul Tao. A day and a night passed. On the morning of the 3rd day, Huanglong Taoist came to the door of the secret chamber and asked to see Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing temporarily ended his cultivation and summoned the Huanglong Taoist to the secret chamber. Huanglong Taoist bowed respectfully and said with a smile, "Greetings, Master. Congratulations on becoming the champion of the Sacred Assembly and becoming famous throughout the world." Without a doubt, the Huanglong Taoist also knew about the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly. Ji Tianqing did not mention this matter. He nodded his head calmly and asked about the current situation of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. Huanglong Taoist quickly answered in detail and truthfully. After listening to him, Ji Tianqing nodded his head satisfactorily and said, "If that's the case, the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains is on the right track and developing quickly. This is a good thing. But you can't relax yet. You have to continue to work hard and manage the affairs of the sect seriously." Huanglong Taoist quickly bowed and said, "Master, I won't forget your words for even a day." "All right, I have something to report. Please make a decision." "What is it?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. Huanglong Taoist smiled and said, "Master, you also know that the territory of our sect has always been only a few million miles wide. In this territory, there are 9 sects and 18 factions, more than 300 towns and tribes. But in recent years, our sect has been developing and growing, and our reputation is like the sun in the sky. Plus, the news that you are the reincarnation of Kenshin has also spread throughout the continent. So, I have received a lot of invitations and gifts recently. They have almost piled up into a mountain. Not only do warriors from all over the world want to join our sect, but even people from the 72 cities in the north want to join our Pillar of Heaven's Mountains." Ji Tianqing suddenly frowned and asked doubtfully, 72 cities in the north? That area is north of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, close to the North Underworld Mountain. It has never been under the jurisdiction of our sect. The 72 cities have a vast territory. The number of powerhouses and population is not inferior to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. For a long time, the 72 cities have thought highly of themselves and have no dealings with us. Why would they join our sect? Huanglong Taoist quickly explained, "Master, you don't know. The 72 cities seem to be united, but in fact, there are endless internal disputes. 10 years ago, the previous leader of the 72 cities died of old age. So far, a new leader has not been selected. For years ago, a few city lords had caused a huge commotion over a remnant piece of an ancient spell. It had almost led to a riot and a war. In recent years, the demon clan of the North Underworld Mountain has also frequently invaded, bringing great pressure to the 72 cities. So the 72 cities are already in a mess. Many city leaders want to join us and seek protection." Ji Tianqing weighed the pros and cons and nodded. "For those warriors who come from all over the world to join our sect, you just need to strictly follow the selection process. The most important thing is to test their character. As for the people of the 72 cities, temporarily put them aside and observe their attitude. After all, the situation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains has just stabilized. It needs to be consolidated and strengthened. Now is not the time to take over the 72 cities. A little carelessness will cause endless trouble. Huanglong Taoist understood what he meant. He quickly bowed and said, "I know what to do. Please rest assured, master." Ji Tianxing chatted with him for a while and discussed some trivial matters. Then he let him leave. After Huanglong Taoist left, Ji Tianxing continued to cultivate in seclusion. This time, he did not continue to cultivate the Sword Soul Tao. Instead, he comprehended the Holy Sword Body and the Stellar Sword Scripture. Once he entered the state of cultivation, he was fully focused and did not have any distractions. He even forgot the passage of time. The sun and moon rose in the east and set in the west. Day after day passed, and he sat in the secret room, motionless. His face was expressionless, and his body was covered with a layer of faint silver light. Soon, half a month passed. In the morning, Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation. After half a month of hard cultivation, his cultivation had become more profound, and his aura was more mysterious and restrained. The realm of the second-level martial saint was already very stable. He was gradually moving towards the third-level martial saint realm. Ji Tianxing estimated that with the current cultivation speed, he would be able to reach the third-level martial saint realm in a few months. Since the morning, he sat in the secret room with his eyes closed. He did nothing and waited patiently, because, according to the usual practice, today was the day Ji Ku sent him a message. Ji Ku had not sent him a message for 2 months. Chapter 22-25. After Ji Tianxing repelled the demon race's army, he had tried to persuade Ji Ku to return. The demon race had suffered a crushing defeat and was currently recuperating. The demon race should not be able to cause any trouble in the next few years. There was no need for Ji Ku to continue hiding in North Underworld Mountain. The situation was too dangerous. However, Ji Ku had her own thoughts and plans and had not returned. Ji Tianxing thought to himself that if he received Ji Ku's message today, he would persuade her to return no matter what. Time passed silently. Half a day passed quickly, and the sun began to set in the west. Ji Tianxing sat in the secret chamber, motionless from beginning to end. Although he was worried and expectant, his breathing was not chaotic at all. This was also a kind of tempering of the mind and was very helpful for nourishing one's qi. Finally, 12 hours passed, and the sky turned dark. The anticipation in Ji Tianxing's heart gradually turned into disappointment. He guessed that Ji Ku would not send a message today. There has been no news for 3 months. Could it be that Ku has encountered some trouble? Or is she in seclusion and has no time to send me a message? Ji Tianxing guessed inwardly, but he could only feel anxious. At this moment, a light purple stream of light suddenly descended from the sky. Swoosh! The stream of light rushed into the secret chamber and stopped in front of Ji Tianxing. After the purple light faded away, a black communication jade slip appeared. Ji Tianxing's eyes lit up. He quickly reached out and grabbed the jade slip, releasing his divine sense to enter it and read the message. Immediately, Ji Ku's clear and melodious voice sounded in his mind. "Big brother Tianxing, I have been in seclusion for the past 2 months and did not send you a message in time. Sorry for making you worry." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing breathed a sigh of relief. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth as he muttered to himself. As expected, your seclusion was delayed. It's good that you are fine. Ji Ku continued. Big brother Tianxing, in the past few months, the situation in Dark North Mountain has been rather peaceful. The demons haven't made any unusual moves. Biming Palace and the Holy City had been rebuilt long ago, and the demon race had been recuperating all this time. It was estimated that they would not start another war for the next 10 years. The ancestral devil god was still recuperating and cultivating in the Blood Sea Abyss. Great Devil Sage Ling Xian and Third Devil Sage Ta Tuo had already recovered from their injuries and were currently taking charge of the situation. In addition to these 2 great devil saints, two new Great Devil Saints had emerged in recent months. However, the two new demon saints are too weak to be a threat. Upon hearing this news, Ji Tianxing was greatly reassured. He thought to himself, back when Luo River was causing havoc in Baiming Palace, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo were severely injured and almost lost their lives. In just half a year's time, both of them had recovered from their injuries. The ancestral fiend god must have used some kind of secret technique to allow them to recover their strength so quickly. But in this way, both of them will be like Patriarch Xue Pao, unable to make any further progress and have no hope of reaching the deity realm in their lifetime. At this time, Ji Ke said in a relaxed tone, "Big brother Tianxing, other than this, I have another piece of good news to tell you. Just a month ago, a mysterious force barged into Baiming Mountain and is wreaking havoc in the southern region, carrying out a massacre. According to the information I gathered, this mysterious force is a group of strange people. There are dozens of them, and they are very powerful. They are invincible in the southern region of Baiming Mountain. Be it the experts of the major tribes or the 100,000 elite warriors, none of them can stop them. Currently, that force is growing stronger and stronger, but Ling Xian and Ta Tuo are helpless against it. They are busy all day and are deeply worried. I really hope that those mysterious experts can kill their way to Baiming Palace and get rid of Ling Xian, Ta Tuo, and the ancestral fiend god. Then the world will be at peace." At this point, Ji Ku chuckled with anticipation. Ji Tianxing was also affected by her mood, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. That was all the information in the communication jade slip. After Ji Tianxing heard this, he used his divine sense to reply to the message in the jade slip. "Cuckoo! Now that the demon race has suffered great losses, they will not be able to invade Luo Shui Divine Nation for at least 10 years. They're no longer a threat. When I break through to the deity realm and try to kill the ancestral fiend god, Baiming Mountain will be declared destroyed. There is not much meaning for you to continue staying in Baiming Mountain. Moreover, your situation is very dangerous. Why don't you take this opportunity to leave and come back as soon as possible? If you want to go to Luo Shui Divine Nation, I will arrange for you to cultivate in Luo Shui Mountain. If you don't want to go, come to Sky Pillar Mountain to find me. In short, you have to leave Baiming Mountain as soon as possible. Don't make me worry." Ji Tianxing engraved these words in the communication jade slip and was about to send it out with a wave of his hand. However, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind, and he took back the communication jade slip. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "Cuckoo, the group of mysterious experts you mentioned, are there 70 or 80 of them? Do they have the upper body of a human and the lower body of a lion? Do they have 4 hooves, wear black armor, and speak a strange language?" After saying that, Ji Tianxing released the jade slip. Swish! The jade slip turned into a faint purple light and disappeared into the dark night. After sending out the communication jade slip, Ji Tianxing waited quietly. His eyes flashed with the light of contemplation. For some reason, when Ji Ke said that a mysterious force was causing trouble in Baiming Mountain, he immediately thought of Yu and the foreign race guards. The bad premonition in his heart became more and more intense. About a quarter of an hour later, a light purple streamer flew over from the horizon. Swish! Ji Ke's communication jade slip returned and landed in front of Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing opened his eyes and reached out to receive the communication jade slip. He hurriedly read the contents of the jade slip. Ji Ke's crisp voice immediately sounded in his mind. Her tone was filled with surprise. "Big brother Tianxing, you are simply too amazing. Your guess is too accurate. I just checked the information. You're absolutely right. That mysterious force indeed only has a few dozen experts. Moreover, their appearances are very strange. They are half human and half beast and wear black armor. They are very strong. Almost every one of them has the strength of a martial sage. Fortunately, they do not understand the demon race's language. Otherwise, they would have expanded their forces and taken over many cities and tribes." At this point, Ji Ke paused for a moment and asked doubtfully, "Big brother Tianxing, How do you know what those mysterious experts look like? Does this matter have anything to do with you? Is this your plan? If so, then all the more reason I cannot leave Biming Mountain. I will stay to help you gather information and monitor the movements of Ling Xian and Biming Palace. If necessary, I will also assist those mysterious experts and help them eliminate Biming Palace and the ancestor demon god. Big Brother Tianxing, don't worry. I will protect myself. The contents of the jade slip ended there. After Tianxing heard it, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He hurriedly replied to Ku and explained the matter. Ku, you misunderstood. Those mysterious experts with strange appearances have nothing to do with me. You must not provoke them. They come from the depths of the starry sky. They are foreign race experts from other worlds. They are very vicious and cruel. Simply put, they are invaders. Chapter 22-26. Tianxing hurriedly told Ku the truth of the matter so that she wouldn't misunderstand. He had personally experienced the terror of Yu and those black-armored guards. He didn't want Ku to put herself in danger and come into contact with those terrifying foreign race experts. The transmission jade slip was quickly sent out. This time, Tianxing didn't have to wait for long. About half an hour later, the transmission jade slip flew back and landed in front of him. He hurriedly reached out and caught the jade slip, probing it with his divine sense to read Ku's message. He heard Ku's voice filled with surprise and doubt as she asked, Big Brother Tianxing, so those mysterious experts aren't from this world? No wonder they look so strange. I've never seen them before. No wonder they couldn't communicate with the devil race and were so powerful. Then wouldn't they be invading the North Underworld Mountain after killing so many people? If that's the case, with their strength and methods, it's very likely that they could exterminate the devil race and the ancestral fiend god. This is good news for us. At this point, Ku paused for a moment, her excitement and anticipation fading. She asked with some doubt, That's right, Big Brother Tianxing, in my memory, you once told me a story about the void. You said that the void is vast and boundless. Even divine Tao emperors can't see the edge of the void. There are billions of stars in the void, and each star is a small world. When many stars gather together, they form many star fields and galaxies. However, 99% of the stars are dead stars. There's no light, air, or five-element spirit chi. It's impossible to give birth to life. Only a very small number of special stars can give birth to life, giving birth to various civilizations and martial arts inheritances. That's why there are 3,000 great worlds and 3 great worlds. The 5 elements world we live in is one of the 3,000 great worlds. If one can surpass the martial god realm, they can ascend to one of the 3 great worlds. Big Brother Tianxing, those mysterious experts in black armor, which world do they come from? Are they from the 3,000 great worlds? Or the 3 great worlds? Tianxing held the transmission jade slip with both hands and silently listened to Ku's words. His expression and gaze became complicated. Ku evoked his memories, and a scene appeared in his mind. It was more than 1,000 years ago when he had just become a divine king. At that time, he took Mingyu and strolled through the starry sky to admire the beautiful scenery of the Phoenix Starfield. Mingyu was a divine Tao emperor. She had never seen the universe's starry sky. That's why he told her about the Voids' story. She laughs, you, cessed. It was also on that night that he used his great divine ability to pluck 18 Big Dipper stars, refine them into a string of beads, and gave it to Mingyu. Memory's teeth, Tianxing clenched the communication jade slip in his hand and murmured in a somewhat low mood. Ku still remembers those words from back then. I suppose her memories have all been restored. She doesn't hate me. She's still pestering me. She even risked her life to stay in the North Underworld Mountain to gather information. Thinking of this, he made up his mind. He used his divine sense to send a message to the transmission jade slip. Ku, the world's vastness and the voids are far beyond our imagination. Even I haven't seen it all, let alone understand it all. The mysterious experts who invaded the North Underworld Mountain shouldn't be from the 3 great worlds. They're neither from the Dragon Realm, nor the God realm, nor the underworld. I don't know which great world they're from, but you don't need to investigate this question. Let the devil race deal with them. I have a premonition that the North Underworld Mountain will be in chaos. It's not good for you. You have to come back as soon as possible. Only then can I be at ease. After Ji Tianxing said this in a serious tone, he sent out the transmission jade slip. Whoosh! The transmission jade slip turned into a purple light and flew away. Ji Tianxing closed his eyes silently and waited for Ji Ku's reply. This time, the wait was exceptionally long. After an entire hour, late at night, Ji Ku finally sent back a message. Big brother Tianxing, I know you're worried about me, but this time, please forgive my stubbornness. The Five Elements world was originally sealed by the gods. For thousands of years, it hasn't been invaded by races from other worlds. But this time, mysterious experts from other races have come. Maybe this is an opportunity for us. Of course, it could also be a disaster. But no matter what, I can't leave at this time. It wasn't easy for me to sneak into the North Underworld Palace when Ling Xian's trust and become one of his confidants. If I leave now, I won't be able to sneak in and gather information in the future. Big brother Tianxing, don't worry. I'll protect myself. Ji Ku's message ended here. Ji Tianxing was very clear about her nature. Since she had said those words, she must have thought it through carefully before making the decision. Moreover, she wouldn't change her mind easily. From his point of view, Ji Ku's personality was the same as his. Once they decided on something or someone, they wouldn't change their mind. Ji Tianxing gripped the jade slip tightly and closed his eyes with a solemn expression. After a long silence, he murmured to himself, "Cuckoo, take care." At this time, Burial of Heaven's voice sounded in his mind, persuading him. Actually, I can understand Ming Yue's thoughts. I also agree with her decision. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why?" Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, "And you and those other race guards came here for a strange reason. It seems to have something to do with the destroyed Phantom World. But you also know that they must have come from some great world in the depths of the starry sky. Don't you want to know which world they came from? Why did they cross the void and come to the Five Elements world? What is their goal? What happened to those worlds in the depths of the void? For nearly 1,000 years, the God Seal of the Five Elements world has gradually weakened, and many cracks and holes have appeared on the golden barrier. Does this mean that the seal of the Five Elements world will be lifted soon? Once the seal is lifted, even martial gods will have a chance to ascend to the God realm. Also, you found the Phantom Star Core and the remains of the divine warship. Does this mean that a war has broken out between the great worlds or the gods? Burial of Heaven said so much in one breath and asked so many questions. It paused for a moment and continued. Since we've encountered these things, we should figure it out as soon as possible. Perhaps in the 1,000 years since your death, the outside world has also changed. We won't stay in the Five Elements world forever. Sooner or later, we will kill our way back to the God realm and take back your glory and status. If we can figure out the situation in advance, wouldn't it be better for us? Chapter 22-27. Even if the Burial of Heaven did not remind him, Ji Tianxing would have guessed. When he first entered the void, he found the ethereal star core and the remains of the divine ship. At that time, he guessed that the major worlds in the depths of the universe were not peaceful. Moreover, he would not stay in the Five Elements world forever. He would eventually return to the divine world. The appearance of Yu and the foreign race experts was definitely a bad sign. Of course, he had thought of investigating Yu and the others' intentions and origins. However, that would have to wait until he was strong enough to put it into action. He was worried about Ji Ku's safety, which was why he objected to Ji Ku staying in the North Underworld Mountain. He did not want Ji Ku to get close to the foreign race experts. However, Ji Ku had his own thoughts and persistence. He had made up his mind. At this point, there was nothing he could do. He could only pray that Ji Ku would be safe and successful. After a moment of silence, he took out a large number of spiritual stones and elixirs from his interspatial ring and began to cultivate in seclusion. The changes made him feel that the situation was getting more and more tense. There might be chaos in the future. He was more eager to improve his strength. He only wanted to break through to the divine realm as soon as possible. Only then could he shake the world and solve all problems. Within the divine nation of Tianju, there was a vast alternate space hidden under the heavenly wind and fire layer. This space had a radius of millions of miles. It was filled with boundless heaven and earth, spiritual chi, and invisible divine power. This was the abode of martial god Tianju, the divine nation where he lived and cultivated. The divine kingdom was prosperous and flourishing, and all that could be seen was gorgeous scenery. There were endless mountains and forests in the surroundings. There was a vast plain in the middle. On the pleasant plain, there were 9 ancient and majestic cities. They protected the magnificent divine city in the middle. The divine city was magnificent and majestic. There were rows upon rows of palaces and buildings. Even the streets and plazas were paved with golden bricks. It was extremely luxurious. At this time, outside a secret chamber in the depths of the divine palace, a middle-aged man in a purple robe with a head full of white hair was standing respectfully outside the stone door, quietly waiting. This person was tall and had a handsome but pale face. There was a small purple sword mark on his forehead that was faintly flickering with lightning. Without a doubt, he was the commander of the Immortal Guards, the right-hand man of martial god Tianju, the famous martial saint Yi Lushui. Although his status was the same as Qin Zhang's, they were both commanders of the Immortal Guards. However, his strength and methods were superior to Qin Zhang's. He was deeply trusted and valued by martial god Tianju. Yi Lushui stood in the dark passage with his head slightly lowered, waiting quietly. The secret room in front of him was the most heavily guarded place in the divine kingdom. It was where martial god Tianju cultivated in seclusion. After about 100 breaths of time, the wide and tall black stone door lit up with a dense white light. Shwa! The white light formed a mirror that was half the height of a person, revealing a noble and dignified figure in a golden robe. This figure only had the upper half of his body. He wore a golden robe and a crown on his head. His face was dignified without being angry. It was martial god Tianju. Yi Lushui hurriedly knelt on one knee and respectfully saluted, saying, "Subordinate Yi Lushui greets Divine Lord. Divine Lord, may I know what orders you have for me?" In the white light mirror, martial god Tianju looked down at Yi Lushui with a dignified face and said in a low voice, "2 years ago, you were ordered to kill Ji Tianxing, snatch the sword of the burial of heaven, and find the mystery of ascension. But you've tried a few times, and all of them ended in failure. Now that 2 years have passed, Ji Tianxing has grown to a terrifying level. It has been proven that he is the reincarnation of Kenshin. The sword of the burial of heaven is in his hands." Yi Lushui knelt on the ground and did not get up. He lowered his head and said in a low voice, "It is my fault. Divine Lord, please punish me." Martial god Tianju said in a dignified tone, "What's the use of punishing me now? I will give you another chance to make up for your mistakes. No matter what, no matter the cost, you must get rid of Ji Tianxing. If you can find the mystery of ascension, that would be the best. Even if you can't get it, you must get rid of him. He must not be allowed to continue growing." Yi Lushui quickly cupped his fists and bowed. He said in a sonorous tone, "I understand. I will find a way to get rid of him. Even if I have to sacrifice myself, I will not hesitate. However, Ji Tianxing is already very powerful. He is on par with Wu Duantian. I am afraid that I am not strong enough to get rid of him and delay your plan." Yi Lushui already knew about the battle between Ji Tianxing and Wu Duantian and the killing of Qin Zheng and the Sky City governor. Therefore, he was not confident that he could get rid of Ji Tianxing. Martial god Tianju naturally thought of this as well. He extended his hand and shot out a white light expressionlessly. Swoosh! The dense white light wrapped around a strange-looking sword. It flew out of the stone door and landed in front of Yi Lushui. After the white light dissipated, it could be seen that it was not a sword but a 5-foot-long ruler. The ancient-looking ruler was as wide as a palm. It was dark purple in color, and its surface was engraved with divine runes and symbols. It shone with a faint purple light. Yi Lushui stared at the purple ruler and was shocked. He asked in disbelief, Tying's soul, severing ruler? God Master, what are you? Martial God Tanju said expressionlessly, I am still in seclusion. I am at the critical juncture of breaking through the bottleneck. I am afraid I will not be able to come out for a few years. If that wasn't the case, I would have killed Ji Tianxi myself. This great Yin soul severing ruler, this god will grant you temporary use to give you a hand. With your strength and methods, plus this divine ruler, you shouldn't have failed, right? Yi Lushui found it hard to believe. His heart was filled with shock and joy. He quickly cupped his fists and bowed. He said in a firm tone, God Master, please rest assured. With this weapon, I will definitely be able to kill Ji Tianxing. I will not let you down. After saying that, he could not wait to reach out and hold the Tying soul severing ruler. He looked at it excitedly. The seemingly thin Tying soul severing ruler was as heavy as a mountain. When he held it, he could feel the vicissitudes of life. It also contained a mysterious power that could affect and restrain a martial artist's divine soul. Yi Lushui carefully put away the ruler and was about to leave to carry out his mission. At this moment, martial god Tianju said, Wait, Yi Lushui, what has Yuanjun been doing recently? When Yuanjun was mentioned, Yi Lushui could not help but stiffen. After hesitating for a while, he answered truthfully, God Master, the incident at the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly has dealt a heavy blow to the First Prince. Rumors about the First Highness had already spread throughout the entire continent and were known by many martial Dao forces. I have given strict orders to stop the rumors from spreading in the martial arts world. However, the results are minimal and difficult to stop. For nearly a month, the First Prince has been hiding in his palace and has not stepped out. Chapter 22-28. Hearing Yi Liushui's words, martial god Tianju frowned and his face turned ugly. Bastard, as my eldest son, how can he be so weak and unable to withstand the storm? Not to mention rumors. Even if I am condemned by thousands of people and have a bad reputation for 1,000 years, don't even think about breaking my heart and will. Such depravity will only make others laugh and disappoint the imperial clan's ministers. Martial god Tianju shouted angrily, and his eyes were filled with disappointment. Yi Lushui hurriedly cupped his fists and comforted, Sir God Master, please calm down. His First Highness is your most valued eldest son. He was born honorable and talented. Since he was young, His First Highness grew up in endless glory. With the title of Divine Nation's #1 genius, he has never suffered any setbacks. Now that he has encountered such a thing and suffered such a heavy blow, it is reasonable for him to be depressed. However, I believe that with His First Highness' wisdom and perseverance, he will be able to pull himself together soon. Martial God Tianju nodded and said in a heavy tone, I have always thought highly of Yuanjun. Even when he sacrificed his fourth son, Yuanchong, I have never punished him. Now it seems that he is still too young and lacking. Yi Lushui, visit Yuanjun on behalf of me. It doesn't matter if you comfort him or provoke him, as long as he can pull himself together. How can he drown his sorrows in alcohol every day? If he was still my son, he would have remembered this humiliation and hatred and worked even harder to become stronger. If he can't even overcome this hurdle, how can I give Divine Nation to him in the future? Yi Lushui hurriedly nodded and replied, I understand. Don't worry, Sir God Master. I will definitely pull His First Highness together and let him cultivate in seclusion. Martial God Tianju slightly nodded and waved his hand. All right, you may leave. When he could kill Ji Tianxing, he would come back and report back. Otherwise, don't come to see me. Yi Lushui revealed a confident smile and said firmly, with the help of the ruler, I will definitely succeed. Just wait for my good news. Then, he bowed to martial god Tianju and left. The white mirror on the stone door quickly dissipated and everything returned to normal. Unknowingly, half a month passed. In these 10 days, Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion in the secret room. He was comprehending the secret techniques and increasing his power quickly. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains had always been peaceful. The disciples were diligently cultivating, and the 9 sects and 18 factions were also recruiting talents. The Huanglong Taoist had been busy. Not only did he have to deal with the surrender of the 72 cities, but he also had to manage the sects and cities under his rule. Everything was progressing in a good direction. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains' influence and foundation were getting stronger and stronger, and their reputation was getting more and more resounding. Late at night, the moon was dark and the wind was strong. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains was completely silent. Only a few palaces and mansions were still lit. 95% of the disciples were either sleeping or cultivating. It was very quiet on the mountain peak. Only a few groups of patrolling guards were walking in the dark. At this moment, a black shadow silently floated by halfway up the mountain. Shwa! The black shadow landed on a protruding millstone on the cliff. Under the cover of the night, the black shadow curled up in the corner of the boulder. His eyes were bright as he looked at the night sky, secretly searching for something. From the figure, this man in black was wearing a black suit and a mask. He was a muscular young man. He squatted on the millstone and observed the surroundings. When he found that there was no one around, he stretched out his hand and shot out a pale blue light. Chua! The pale blue light flickered 3 times in a row and was quickly extinguished. This seemed to be some kind of special signal. Not long after, a black shadow sped over from the pitch-black night below the cliff. Chua! In the blink of an eye, the tall black shadow landed on the millstone and stood still. This person was also wearing a black suit and a black iron mask on his face. However, one could vaguely see that this person was tall. His sideburns and eyebrows were snow white, and his eyes were bright and sharp. He exuded a dignified and powerful aura. The black-clothed young man glanced at him and quickly bowed. He used a voice transmission technique and said, "Greetings, Lord Yi." The black-clothed man, called Lord Yi, nodded slightly and said, 2 years ago, I arranged for you to sneak into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains as a spy in case of an emergency. Now that 2 years have passed, how is your mission going?" The black-clothed young man bowed respectfully and reported, "My lord, I didn't disappoint you and successfully entered the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I have become a disciple that is heavily nurtured. Now, I have won the trust of a few deacons and elders." Lord Yi nodded again and said with relief, "That's good. My efforts in nurturing you back then were not in vain. 2 years of seclusion, only to be used tonight. Don't worry, after tonight, you can leave the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I will not treat you unfairly." The black-clothed young man's eyes lit up and said with anticipation, "Thank you for your nurturing, Lord Yi. I just want to return to my hometown and accompany my parents after completing the mission." Without waiting for him to finish, Lord Yi waved his hand and said, "These are all small matters. As long as the mission tonight is successful, I will definitely let your family reunite." The black-clothed young man was moved to tears and quickly bowed to express his gratitude. "Thank you for your help, Lord. I am willing to be loyal to you for the rest of my life. My lord, please follow me." After saying that, the black-clothed young man bowed and made a pleased gesture. He brought Lord Yi away from the millstone and flew towards the peak of the mountain. Their movements were neither fast nor slow. They did not reveal any aura, nor did they reveal any energy fluctuations. The black-clothed young man was very familiar with the defense of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He brought Lord Yi to the peak of the mountain and bypassed the patrols and sentries with ease before entering the holy city. There were many houses and palaces in the holy city, and thousands of disciples lived there. About 15 minutes later, the black-clothed young man led Lord Yi to a house without anyone noticing. The two of them hid in the woods outside the house. The black-clothed young man said to Lord Yi through voice transmission, "Lord Yi, this is one of the 4 courtyards of the inner sect. There are 26 inner sect disciples and more than 100 servants and odd job workers living here. The most elite core disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains all have their own residences. It is not convenient for us to take action. Only the disciples of the 4 courtyards of the inner sect are suitable for us to take action. These people are all young talents who are favored by the elders of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. They have good potential. Once these disciples go missing, the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains will definitely try to find them. They will definitely not sit by and do nothing. Lord E nodded with satisfaction and said, That is good. Not only is it convenient for us to take action, but it will also cause the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains to feel the pinch and have no choice but to investigate and search. You have done well. Stay here and support me. I will be able to complete the plan in, at most, 15 minutes. Chapter 22-29. The black-clothed youth stood guard outside the house, helping Lord Yi keep a lookout. He had calculated the time. The next time the patrolling guards passed by here, it would be at least half an hour later. He believed that Lord Yi would definitely be able to complete the mission within this half an hour. Sure enough, after a short 15 minutes, Lord Yi left and returned. On the surface, Lord Yi did not seem to have changed. In fact, in this 15 minutes, there was no sound coming from the house. Even the lights in the house were not extinguished. As long as one did not enter the house to check, one would not be able to see anything strange. However, in Lord Ye's right hand, there was an additional palm-sized black pouch. At first glance, that pouch looked like an ordinary perfume pouch. However, there were no flower patterns embroidered on it, making it look rather mysterious. In fact, there was a rather large space in the pouch, and there were more than 20 young martial artists lying in a disorderly manner. These young martial artists were all wearing standard white robes with the same emblem and pattern embroidered on their chests. Everyone was unconscious or in a deep sleep, completely unaware of what was happening in the outside world. The black-clothed youth glanced at the pouch and immediately revealed a look of admiration. He transmitted his voice to Lord Yi. Lord Yi, have you succeeded? Lord Yi nodded slightly and sneered in a mocking tone. I personally took action to deal with these small fries. How could I fail? Don't waste time. Quickly bring me away. The black-clothed youth did not waste any more words and hurriedly brought Lord Yi through the night sky, rushing down the mountain. On the evening of the second day, the sun was about to set. Ji Tianxing was cultivating in the secret chamber. His entire body flickered with a faint golden light, emitting a majestic magic power fluctuation. Suddenly, Huanglong Daoist's voice sounded from outside the secret chamber. His tone was somewhat anxious. Master, something happened. Quickly come and take a look. The sudden shout startled Ji Tianxing, who was cultivating. He slowly ended his cultivation, exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and opened his eyes. He frowned slightly and looked calmly at the entrance of a secret room. Through the stone door, he asked, Huanglong, why are you so panicked that you have to knock on my door and wake me up? Huanglong Daoist did not dare to hide anything and hurriedly reported, Master, last night, 26 inner sanctum disciples went missing. There's been no news of them since. What? Ji Tianxing's face suddenly changed, his eyebrows furrowed, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He waved his hand and released a dazzling light, opening the stone door of the secret room. Huanglong Daoist hurriedly entered the secret chamber and bowed respectfully. Ji Tianxing looked at him with burning eyes and said in a dignified tone, What's going on? Tell me everything from beginning to end. Huanglong Daoist organized his thoughts and explained, Master, the missing 26 inner disciples are all from the western inner courtyard. They have great talent and potential. Last night, when the lamps were lit, the 26 disciples were still in the western courtyard. They were either resting or cultivating. There was nothing unusual. The servants in the western courtyard can attest to this. However, when it was time to practice swordsmanship this morning, the disciples of the western courtyard did not appear. Deacon Wu went to the western courtyard to look for them, only to find that the 26 inner disciples were all missing. Only the servants were left. After the incident, Deacon Wu hurriedly reported to the elders. A few elders personally led the guards to search the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains several times, but they still couldn't find those disciples. The elders then reported this to me and asked me to think of a way to find them. However, I spent 6 hours and searched 20,000 miles around the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, but I did not find any clues. I really have no idea what to do, so I can only come to you for help." After Huanglong Daoist finished speaking, Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while. He asked in a low voice, "Have you investigated the western courtyard? Are there any traces of fighting in the disciples' residences? Also, have you interrogated the servants and odd job workers? Why would the 26 inner disciples disappear for no reason? Don't tell me there's no movement at all?" Huanglong Daoist shook his head and said with a grave expression, "Master, I have personally investigated the situation in the western courtyard. There are no traces of fighting in the disciples' residences. Even those 100 over servants, I have personally interrogated them, but they are completely clueless. Those 20 over disciples seem to have evaporated into thin air without leaving any trace. I have no other choice, so I had to disturb your closed-door cultivation. Please make a decision." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a grave expression, "It's impossible for the 26 living disciples to disappear into thin air. This must be some conspiracy deliberately targeting our Pillar of Heaven's mountains. As long as it's done by humans, there will definitely be traces and clues left behind. It's just that we haven't found them yet." He paused for a moment and suddenly thought of a problem. He asked Huanglong, "That's right, did the patrolling guards on duty last night interrogate them? Did they find anything?" Huanglong nodded and then shook his head. "I have also interrogated them, but they didn't find anything." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "If that's the case, the person who did this is a strong person. He didn't alert anyone and didn't leave any clues. Of course, there's another possibility, which is that when the other party took action, they avoided the patrolling guards." Huanglong suddenly came to a realization and asked, "Master, you mean it's very likely that someone from our sect is involved in this matter, acting as a spy for the other party?" "Yes." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "There's another possibility, which is that it's the doing of a strong person from our sect." Huanglong frowned and said with a heart full of doubts, "But I have already counted the number of disciples in the sect. All the deacons and elders are present. There's no one missing." Ji Tianqing looked at him with a sharp gaze and asked, "Then how many disciples are there? Are there any missing people?" Huanglong thought for a while and quickly answered, "There are 3 disciples in the inner sect who are not present. 2 of them are out on missions. There's only 1 disciple called Su Qing. I don't know why, but he's also missing." Ji Tianqing's eyes immediately brightened and said in a dignified tone, "Immediately investigate this Su Qing's background. When did he enter our sect?" Huanglong quickly answered, "There's no need to investigate. I still remember this person's identity and information. Su Qing entered our sect 2 years ago. He has outstanding talent, a bright mind, and is very good at talking and doing things. Moreover, his parents are dead and his family is destroyed. He has no relatives." Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look and said in a low voice, "At present, it seems that this person is the most suspicious. Immediately send someone. No, I will personally investigate this matter. I want to see who has the guts to make a move on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains." Huanglong quickly cupped his hands and bowed, saying respectfully, "Master will investigate this matter personally. I'm sure you'll find the truth." Chapter 22:30. Ji Tianqing did not waste any time and simply got up and left the secret room. He first went to the west courtyard and checked every disciple's room. There were no signs of fighting in the room, so naturally there were no clues. However, Ji Tianqing also judged that the other party must be very strong, possibly a martial saint expert. He used his divine sense and time reversal to deduce the situation of the west courtyard last night. As a result, he vaguely sensed a strong aura that had been active in the west courtyard. This proved that his guess was correct. It was indeed done by a martial saint expert. Moreover, he had acted alone. Therefore, he left the west courtyard and investigated the surroundings of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. An hour later, he found a clue halfway up the back of the mountain. On a large millstone on the cliff, he found some clues. There were a few footprints on the fine, dust on the surface of the rock. Some of the footprints were slightly smaller, while the others were slightly larger and the traces were slightly heavier. It was impossible to find such hidden traces with the naked eye. Tianxing also used his divine sense to discover this detail. It turned out that there were two people who had come to this deserted cliff and stayed on the millstone. Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment, then guessed the clues. One of the footprints is most likely that of the martial saint expert. The other footprint is most likely that of the other party's spy, which is the inner disciple who went missing today, Su Qing. After understanding this point, he sank into deeper doubts. That martial saint expert, using Su Qing as a spy, sneaked into the sect in the middle of the night and kidnapped more than 20 inner disciples. What does that person want to do? Who is his real target? Where did he take the 20 or so disciples? With such doubts, Tianxing released his divine sense and used the time reversal secret technique to search for clues on the peak of the mountain. After busying himself for 2 hours, he finally found a clue. After that mysterious expert kidnapped more than 20 inner disciples, he flew towards the north. In the sky and on the peak of the mountain, there were still traces of extremely weak magic power fluctuations. Other than Tianxing, no one else could find out, not even the Huanglong Taoist. Thus, Tianxing left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains alone and flew towards the north. To the north of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, there was an endless mountain range and a sea of trees spanning hundreds of thousands of miles. After crossing this area, they were very close to the sphere of influence of the 72 cities. A thought flashed through Tianxing's mind. He secretly speculated that this matter wouldn't have anything to do with the 72 cities, would it? Could it be that the people of the 72 cities wanted to join Tianzhu Mountain, but were rejected by the Huanglong Taoists, so they held a grudge? Or perhaps the conservative faction of the 72 cities learned that someone wanted to betray them and took revenge on Tianzhu Mountain? These thoughts flashed through Tianxing's mind, but he quickly rejected them. After all, these conjectures were simply unfounded. Unknowingly, Tianxing had flown for an hour, covering more than 10,000 miles. During this process, he released his divine sense to cover the surrounding 1,000 miles, searching all the way. However, in the vast mountain range and the deep sea of trees, there were only ferocious demonic beasts and no traces of martial artists. Tianxing temporarily lost the clues and direction and couldn't help but feel anxious. He stopped on top of a towering mountain peak, frowning as he pondered about his next plan. At this moment, a ray of light flew from the sky and landed in front of him. He stretched out his hand to grab it and realized that there was a communication jade slip in the ray of light. It was a pure white communication jade slip, and on the surface, there were pictures and seal words of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and it contained the aura of the Huanglong Taoist. Tianxing hurriedly released his divine sense and entered the jade slip, reading the message from the Huanglong Taoist. Master, Su Qing, that bastard, sent a message. He said in the jade slip that if you want to save the 26 disciples, you have to rush to Feng Ying Mountain within 2 hours. Also, you can only go alone, or else all the disciples will die. The Huanglong Taoist's tone was very anxious, and it was filled with anger and murderous intent, because reality had proven that Su Qing was indeed a traitor, and he was the enemy's spy. Tianxing also frowned, and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. He muttered to himself, "It seems like the enemy has planned this, and their target is not the disciples." He was just worried that he wouldn't be able to find any clues, but the enemy took the initiative to send a message asking him to save the disciples. How could he not see through such an obvious plot? However, even though he understood, he couldn't just leave them to die. Without any hesitation, he turned and flew towards Feng Ying Mountain. Feng Ying Mountain was to the west of him, about 10,000 miles away. It was a tall mountain filled with red maples and green maples. Every time this season, the maple leaves would fill the sky, and the scenery was very pleasant. At this moment, the Huanglong Taoist sent another message. Master, the enemy is obviously plotting something, and it is very likely that they are targeting you. You must not go alone. Please wait for a moment. I will immediately bring people to meet you. Ji Tianxing read the message in the jade bamboo slip and hurriedly replied to the Huanglong Taoist. Huanglong, you will guard the pillar of heaven's mountains. Do not go out on your own, in case the enemy is trying to lure you away. This is an order. Other than martial gods, no one could do anything to me. You don't have to worry. After he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and sent out the jade bamboo slip. Swoosh! The jade bamboo slip flew into the sky and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. About half an hour later, Ji Tianxing arrived at Feng Ying Mountain at lightning speed. The sun had already set, and night was about to fall. Looking down at Feng Ying Mountain from the sky, one could only see the hazy view of the tall mountain, and one could vaguely see a large patch of red and dark green maple trees. In the dense forest, the ground was covered with red maple leaves, and it looked like the ground was covered in flowing fire. Ji Tianxing's face was cold as he landed on the peak of the mountain, and he stood quietly in the forest. His divine sense was like mercury spreading out in all directions and enveloping the entire mountain peak. Every maple tree on the mountain, every leaf, and even every worm in the mud was clearly explored by him. However, to Ji Tianxing's disappointment, there was no one on Feng Ying Mountain. There was not a single shadow, nor was there any ripples of spiritual energy. It was as if no one had been here. Suddenly, a patch of red maple leaves on a patch of grass 100 meters away attracted Ji Tianxing's attention. He walked 100 meters and arrived at the patch of grass. He lowered his head and looked down. Thousands of fiery red maple leaves were quietly spread out on the grass, forming 3 big words. Yuanzhe Valley. Seeing those 3 words, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned, and a thick sense of anger flashed across his eyes. Damn it, how dare you trick me? You sent a message saying that you were at Feng Ying Mountain, and now you want me to go to Yuanzhe Valley. While he was furious, he was also secretly on guard. The other party was obviously very cunning, and would definitely be difficult to deal with. However, he was not afraid. No matter who the other party was, he was confident that he could deal with them. Chapter 22:31. The Yuanzhe Valley was thousands of miles north of Maple Shadow Mountain. It was a desolate and uninhabited deep valley. There was no sign of human habitation for tens of thousands of miles around. Normally, no one would go there except for demons and ferocious beasts. Ji Tianxing suppressed his anger and strode across the night sky, flying towards the north. Another half an hour passed. When he arrived at the Yuanzhe Valley, the dark night sky was already lit up with dim stars. He stood in the sky above the valley and looked down at the Yuanzhe Valley, his eyes cold and murderous. The valley was hundreds of miles wide and was filled with weeds and shrubs. There were many places where rocks could be seen. The valley was thousands of feet deep and was surrounded by a few mountain ranges. The mountains were covered with dense forests. In the dark night sky, the cold wind whistled and swirled above the Yuanzhe Valley. Ji Tianxing looked around and found that there was no light in the Yuanzhe Valley, and there were no fluctuations of magic power. There were also no traces of martial artists. He could not help but frown and thought to himself, could it be that this is also a pretense, and that guy is playing the trick of a crafty rabbit having 3 burrows? At this moment, a flame suddenly lit up in the depths of the Yuanzhe Valley. A dark red flame, as thick as a water tank, bloomed in the night sky and swayed with the night wind. Ji Tianxing turned his head and saw that there seemed to be a black shadow standing beside the flame. The black shadow was too far away, and it was blurry, as if it had merged with the night sky, and he could not see it clearly. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing stepped out 30 miles and landed in the Yuanzhe Valley. He stood 1,000 feet in front of the black shadow. At such a close distance, he could see clearly that it was a tall man in black. His aura was restrained and powerful. Under the mask, a pair of long and narrow eyes flashed with a sharp and frightening cold light. Ji Tianxing could immediately confirm that this man in black was the martial saint expert who had sneaked into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and kidnapped more than 20 disciples. He stared coldly at the other party and asked in a low voice, "Who are you? Why did you kidnap my disciples?" The black-robed man's eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a mocking expression. He said in a playful tone, "Of course it's to lure you here. As for who I am, you'll naturally understand the moment you die." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, "Sure enough, he's coming for me." He sized up the black-clothed man with sharp eyes, using his soul consciousness to check the other's aura. After a short moment, he frowned and muttered to himself, "Strange, this person's aura and voice make me feel a sense of déjà vu. It seems that I fought with him before. Who could he be? Who can't wait to kill me?" At this moment, the black-clothed man waved his palm and sent out a gust of strong wind, extinguishing the flames on the ground. In the next moment, the edges of Yuan-Zhe Valley lit up with more than 40 dazzling lights at the same time. Swish! Swish! Inside each of the 5 colored lights was the figure of an agile or burly martial practitioner. A total of 38 martial practitioners, all wearing black armor and helmets, holding Dharma treasures and weapons in their hands, exuding a violent, murderous aura. Immediately after, the earth began to rumble and tremble. The ground rose into the sky with a golden light, illuminating hundreds of miles of the night sky. In the blink of an eye, the golden light that rose into the sky condensed into a protective shield with a radius of 100 miles, enveloping the entire Yuan-Zhe Valley. This was a saint-level array, with a strong defense and great power. An invisible suppressive force poured down from the night sky, like a giant mountain that was tens of thousands of feet high, fiercely suppressing Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was not surprised by this. As he circulated his soul consciousness to dissolve the suppressive force, he did not forget to sneer at the black-clothed man. "No wonder you wanted to kidnap my disciples and deliberately lure me here. So, you knew that you were no match for me, so you could only set up an ambush here. Ha ha, but you're still too naive. Do you think such a despicable trick can defeat me?" The black-clothed man immediately frowned and shouted in a low voice, "Ji Tianxing, you're too arrogant. 2 years ago, you were like an ant in front of me. Even now, I still treat you like a chicken or a pottery dog. You can be arrogant and spout nonsense as you like. Anyway, I'll take these as your last words." Ji Tianxing had been suspicious. The aura and voice of the black-clothed man were familiar to him. At this time, the black-clothed man did not disguise himself and exposed his real voice and aura. He immediately guessed his identity. "You are Yi Lu Shui. It's you." Ji Tianxing's eyes widened in anger. His gaze became as cold as ice and as sharp as a blade. The black-clothed man was also stunned for a moment. Then he realized that his voice had exposed his identity. He did not intend to hide his identity. Since Ji Tianxing had seen through him, he did not want to hide anymore. Swoosh! He stretched out his hand and pulled off his mask, revealing his real face. A handsome, pale face, snow-white hair hanging down from his temples, and a white beard above his lips. On his forehead, the small sword mark flickered with lightning. He looked at Ji Tianxing with a sneer and said in a cold voice, "That's right, it's me. You didn't expect it, did you? You escaped twice before, but this time you won't be able to escape. You're dead for sure." Ji Tianxing glanced at him and pointed at the more than 30 cultivators around him. He sneered and said, "With just you and those trash?" The more than 30 armored cultivators all had the strength of the 3rd or 4th layer of the Crossing Calamity Realm. On the Shinwu continent, they were all slightly famous martial lords. Their strength was quite good. However, to the current Ji Tianxing, they were just a bunch of chickens and pottery dogs. Yi Lu Shui glared at him and shouted angrily, "Don't be so arrogant, little thief. Cut the crap. I'll kill you now." Following his order, the more than 30 black-armored cultivators around the valley all waved their magic treasures and weapons and charged at Ji Tianxing. Sword lights and saber lights that covered the sky, colorful magic lights, and all kinds of hurricanes immediately drowned Ji Tianxing. Yi Luxue also controlled the ceiling formation and released a terrifying power to suppress him. He immediately fell into a dangerous situation. His strength was also suppressed by 30%, and he couldn't move an inch. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing used his ultimate move without hesitation. Celestial Dragon Tyrant Body. He shouted angrily. His body lit up with a golden light that soared into the sky, and he immediately turned into a 30-meter-tall, golden-armored giant. He slapped out a golden light with his left hand, which turned into a mountain-sized golden dragon claw and slapped at the black-armored cultivators on the left. He waved the sword of Burial of Heaven with his right hand and slashed out a 1,000-meter-long golden sword, which slashed at the cultivators on the right. Bang! 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 With a deafening sound, for black-armored cultivators were hit by the golden dragon claw. They flew back with blood spurting out of their 7 orifices and smashed into the edge of the valley. After the 4 fell to the ground, their bodies were all twisted and deformed. Half of their bones were broken. 3 black-armored cultivators were hit by the giant's sword and were split in half on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 2232. Such a stark contrast caused many of the black-armored martial artists to tremble with fear, their hearts filled with fear. Everyone's attacks also paused, and many people subconsciously retreated. Yi Luxue was furious and shouted with a gloomy face, "No one is allowed to retreat, no matter the price. We must kill Ji Tianxing." Those black-armored martial artists did not dare to disobey, and immediately gathered their courage to attack Ji Tianxing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Once again, an overwhelming amount of sword light and saber light and magic light poured down like a torrential flood, drowning Ji Tianxing's figure. Yi Luxue also used all his strength to control the ceiling array, releasing an invisible force that attacked Ji Tianxing's divine soul. Ji Tianxing was about to counterattack, but his divine soul was suddenly attacked, and he felt a sharp pain in his mind, and his consciousness became a little blurry. But this only lasted for a moment, and the heaven-mending orb immediately released a dense white light to protect his divine soul. The sharp pain and dizziness disappeared, and he waved the sword of Burial of Heaven with murderous intent and used a secret technique. Sword Rain. He formed a sword art with his left hand and waved the sword of Burial of Heaven with his right hand, stabbing out 360 rays of cold light, forming a huge seal. Swoosh! The seal with twinkling starlight disappeared into the night. Then, the night sky above Yuan Zhe Valley lit up with starlight. Tens of thousands of starlight spots lit up the night sky and fell like a meteor shower. As the starlight rapidly approached, everyone could see clearly that each light spot was a giant starlight sword. Tens of thousands of starlight swords were arranged in a special position, forming an extraordinary sword array that covered the sky. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With sharp piercing sounds, the tens of thousands of giant swords descended at the same time, drowning the entire Yuan Zhe Valley. Bang, 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 bang. The giant starlight swords bombarded the golden light shield within 100 miles, and a series of deafening noises spread thousands of miles in the night sky. The seemingly indestructible golden light shield was as fragile as paper under the bombardment of the giant starlight swords. A series of cracking sounds could be heard, and the golden light barrier was immediately filled with numerous cracks, creating a huge hole in it. After a short breath, the huge golden light shield collapsed and disintegrated. The remaining thousands of starlight swords poured down like a storm in the valley, drowning Yi Luxue and the black-armored martial artists. Boom, boom, boom. The loud noises shook the world. The barren Yuanzhe Valley was immediately bombarded with countless holes, and smoke and dust splashed into the sky. It wasn't just the valley that was shaking. Even the surrounding land for 1,000 li was trembling, tens of thousands of ravines splitting open. What an earth-shattering sword rain of destruction. Yi Luxue was very powerful. With the protection of the divine weapon, he was able to resist the attack of the starry sword rain. But Yi Luxue, 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 Yi Luxue, Luxia, Liuxian just a few breaths, more than 30 black armor martial artists were blasted into pieces by the giant starlight swords and turned into minced meat and blood on the ground. After their bodies were destroyed, their souls escaped one after another, trying to escape Yuan-Zhe Valley. However, only the souls of a few lucky ones managed to escape the valley. The souls of the rest were blasted to pieces by the giant starlight swords and scattered in the ruins. After a long time, the earth-shattering noises subsided and the deafening noises dissipated. Peace was restored in Yuan-Zhe Valley. Ji Tianxing stood in the night sky unscathed, holding the sword of burial of heaven. His clothes fluttered, and his whole body was filled with a sacred and majestic, domineering aura. 60 miles away from him, Yilu Shui was also standing in the night sky, staring at him with a ferocious face. Yilu Shui was only slightly injured, but he looked quite miserable. His white hair was scattered on his shoulders, and his purple robe was torn in many places. A pile of rags fluttered in the night wind. There were 2 wounds on his left and right arms, and there was a dark red blood stain at the corner of his mouth. Ji Tianxing. Yilu Shui's eyes were as gloomy as ice, and his expression was as ferocious as a devil's. He roared in a hoarse voice, "You should die 1,000 times, 10,000 times." His tone was full of resentment, and it was full of monstrous hatred. Ji Tianxing looked at him indifferently and said calmly, "I've said it before, you and those trash can't do anything to me, and you'll only be courting death. What else do you have? Just use it, or you won't have a chance." His tone was calm and firm, and it was unquestionable. Yilu Shui grinned and slowly stretched out his right hand, and a black cloth bag appeared in his palm. "Didn't you chase me all the way here to rescue your disciples? What, have you forgotten them?" Suddenly hearing this, Ji Tianxing's face stiffened, and he asked in a cold tone, "Yilu Shui, what did you do to those disciples? Do you want to threaten me with the lives of those disciples?" Yilu Shui quickly shook his head and sneered, "Ha ha, how can I be so naive? You're the decisive and ruthless Kenshin. Why would you care about the lives of those ants? This seat just want to let you see how miserable their outcome was." As he spoke, he waved his right hand, opened the black cloth bag, and shook it a few times. Suddenly, more than 20 figures fell out of the cloth bag and fell into the ruins like dumplings. Plop, plop. An entire 26 figures fell into a deep pit, emitting a wave of muffled sounds and causing clouds of dust to spray into the air. Ji Tianxing recognized them at a glance, and they were the inner disciples of the Pillar of Heaven Mountain. However, all 26 disciples were covered in blood, lying motionless in the deep pit, and there was no sound at all. Ji Tianxing took a closer look, and it turned out that those disciples were all dead, and they had all become cold corpses. More than 20 corpses were lying in the deep pit, and they looked very miserable. Some of them were bleeding from their 7 orifices, some had their heads cut off, and some had their limbs cut off. Some of the corpses were in the most miserable state, and the whole body had become a mess of minced meat, and they did not look like humans anymore. Seeing this shocking scene, Ji Tianxing's pupils contracted, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent, and his aura was as cold as ice. Raging anger and murderous intent surged in his chest, and his fists were clenched so tightly that they made cracking sounds, and his blood was boiling. "Yilu Shui, how can you be so cruel and vicious? I swear, I will cut you into pieces tonight and avenge my disciples." Yilu Shui saw that he was so angry and laughed complacently. "Haha, aren't you the ruthless and superior Kenshin? Why would you care about the lives of mortals and ants? You're angry, right? This seat likes to see the look on your face when you're about to go mad with rage, but there's nothing you can do." As he spoke, he slowly stretched out his right hand, and a dense purple light lit up in his palm. "If I wasn't confident, why would I lure you here?" Chapter 2233. Following Yilu Shui's words, in the palm of his right hand, a mysterious ruler that was 5 feet long and dark purple in color appeared. The ruler was as wide as a palm, and its surface was engraved with mysterious patterns and symbols. It flickered with a dense purple light, and emitted a mysterious and cold aura. Yi Lushui placed his left hand behind his back and held the purple ruler in his right. He pointed it at Ji Tianxing and sneered confidently. Ji Tianxing die. Ji Tianxing remained silent as he stared at the purple ruler in Yi Liushui's hand. His eyes flickered with a cold glint. This ruler, why does it look so familiar? Where have I seen it before? He muttered to himself, his face full of disbelief. After frowning for a moment, he suddenly remembered. His expression changed, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. So it's this. It's the extreme soul-severing ruler. He finally recalled that he had seen this purple ruler in the Tianxian continent when he had fought with the ancient demonic emperor. At that time, the ancient demonic emperor had used this ruler to dig out the deity heart of the imperial monarch Manor's lord and slaughter millions of human soldiers. He had fought fiercely with the ancient demonic emperor and had only managed to kill him after a narrow escape. After the ancient demonic emperor died, the extreme soul-severing ruler had shattered the void and flown away. Back then, the imperial monarch had reminded Ji Tianxing that the extreme soul-severing ruler was a true divine weapon and must have come from the Shenwu continent, from the hands of a deity powerhouse. Many years had passed since then. After Ji Tianxing had come to the Shenwu continent, he had experienced many storms, but he had never seen the extreme soul-severing ruler again. He had almost forgotten about it. But now, the extreme soul-severing ruler had appeared once again. It had actually appeared in Yi Liushui's hands. How could Ji Tianxing not be shocked? He instantly understood. Yi Liushui's extreme soul-severing ruler must have come from martial god Tianzhu. In other words, the deity powerhouse who had secretly colluded with the ancient demonic emperor was also martial god Tianzhu. At this moment, Ji Tianxing came to a sudden realization and finally understood many things. At the same time, he was sure that martial god Tianzhu was up to something. Yi Lushui saw Ji Tianxing's expression change greatly and heard his low shout. He immediately frowned and asked suspiciously, Ji Tianxing, what did you just say? How do you know the name of this ruler? When have you seen this thing? Ji Tianxing was awakened by his words. He looked at him coldly, and the corner of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. It seems like even though you're martial god Tianzhu's lackey, you're not fully trusted by him. You're still in the dark. Clearly, Yi Lushui did not know that martial god Tianzhu had secretly colluded with the demon race. Or perhaps, martial god Tianzhu had once lent the Taiyin soul-severing ruler to the ancient demon emperor, and Yi Lushui did not know about this. Yi Lushui didn't understand what he meant. He frowned and shouted angrily, Humph! Stop trying to be mysterious in front of me. Go to hell. As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed at Ji Tianxing with the Taiyin soul-severing ruler in his right hand. Swoosh! A dazzling purple brilliance, like a blade that was hundreds of feet long, cut through the void and slashed toward Yi Lushui. Before the saber light arrived, an invisible chill had already enveloped Ji Tianxing. Suddenly, his entire body seemed to be sealed in ice, and his blood froze. The divine soul in his mind was also penetrated by the cold chill, and there was a burst of tearing pain. Ji Tianxing only felt dizzy and his vision blurred. His consciousness became blurry, seeing that the dazzling purple blade light was in front of him and was about to hit him. At the critical moment, he hurriedly activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl, releasing a dense white light to protect his divine soul. The formless cold air was immediately dispelled by the sacred white light. His divine soul and consciousness returned to normal, and he woke up again. However, the dazzling purple blade light slashed down brazenly, and he had no time to dodge. Bam! In the muffled sound, Ji Tianxing was hit by the blade light on the spot, and a splash of pale golden blood splashed out from his chest, and his whole body flew out. He drew an arc in the night sky, and flew for a full 20 miles before he stopped, and with a plop, he smashed into the edge of the deep valley. Smoke and dust rose everywhere, and the earth trembled. After all, Ji Tianxing was 10 feet tall, like a god of war in golden armor, and his body was too big. He climbed up from the deep pit and raised his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. Looking down, there was a long, bone-deep gully left on his chest and abdomen that was more than 10 feet long. Golden blood constantly gushed out from the wound, dripping onto the soil. The invisible cold chill was corroding the wound, quietly invading his body, and was quickly spreading. It is indeed a divine weapon. Even my celestial dragon tyrant body can't resist it, he murmured in a low voice, and hurriedly used his power to heal the wound, and activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl to dispel the power of the Taiyin soul, severing ruler. At the same time, Yi Lushui held the Taiyin soul, severing ruler, and flew over with a cold smile on his face. You are indeed the famous Kenshin. Even though you have reincarnated, the bloodline of the god spirit still flows in your body. However, you are destined to die tonight. Your sword of burial of heaven and your bloodline of the god spirit will all belong to the divine master. Yi Lushui sneered proudly and once again waved the Taiyin soul, severing ruler, and fiercely slashed out 3 dazzling purple light blades. Swish, swish, swish. 300 feet long purple light blades cut through the night sky like lightning and slashed toward Ji Tianxing's head. The light blades locked onto his divine soul, and he had nowhere to hide. No matter where he ran, even if he hid in a different space, he would be hit by the light blades. At the moment of life and death, Ji Tianxing was surprisingly calm, and his eyes stared coldly at Yi Lushui. Even if you have a divine weapon, so what? You want to kill me? Not even in your next life. Ji Tianxing gritted his teeth and shouted angrily. He activated the power of the heaven-patching orb and slashed toward the 3 purple light blades. God's Slayer Sword. The dark and cold sword of burial of heaven burst out a dazzling white light, and it condensed into a giant sword that was 1,000 feet long and swept across the night sky. Pung, pung, pung. There were 3 consecutive explosions that shook the sky and the earth. The sacred white light giant sword suddenly slashed the 3 purple light blades, and suddenly the light blades were shattered and exploded. The white light giant sword's power didn't diminish, and it swept toward Yi Lushui again. Pung! Yi Lushui was caught off guard, and he was sent flying by the giant sword. He drew an arc in the night sky and smashed into the ruins 30 miles away. Plop! The ground was smashed into a pit that was 1,000 feet deep, and dust filled the sky. Yi Lushui coughed twice, and he endured the pain in his chest and climbed up from the deep pit. There was a bloody wound across his chest and abdomen. It was more than a foot long, and his internal organs were clearly visible. Dark red blood gushed out like spring water and immediately soaked his robe. Yi Lushui's eyes widened in horror, and he looked at Ji Tianxing in disbelief. He exclaimed, How is this possible? This is the ancient divine ruler. How can you resist the power of a divine weapon? Chapter 22:34. Ever since Yi Lushui had obtained the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler, he had been full of confidence. After half a month of planning, he had successfully lured Ji Tianxing to Yuanzhe Valley. Even though more than 30 elite martial artists had been killed, he was not discouraged. He thought that with the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler, he would be invincible. He would definitely be able to kill Ji Tianxing in one fell swoop. The facts had proven that the heavenly ruler was indeed powerful. He had only used one move to severely injure Ji Tianxing. This made him even more proud. He thought that he had Ji Tianxing's life in his hands. However, the scene in front of him made him shiver. His pride and anticipation had vanished. Ji Tianxing had blocked the power of the heavenly ruler. Instead, he had severely injured Yi Lushui. This was simply too inconceivable and terrifying. Yi Lushui could not imagine how Ji Tianxing had done it. He was only a martial sage. The sword of burial of heaven in his hand was only a holy sword. It was not a heavenly sword. Yi Lushui could not figure out why this had happened. Just then, Ji Tianxing flew to him and slashed down with the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Broken Moon's sword. The Sword of Burial of Heaven gave off a dazzling white radiance again. It formed a white sword radiance that was 100 feet long and slashed down with divine power. The entire Yuanzhe Valley was immediately illuminated by the white radiance. Yi Liushui's face, which was covered with blood, was filled with shock and horror, which was clearly visible. Even a heavenly weapon could not kill you? I don't believe it. Yi Liushui was filled with grief and indignation. He jumped up unwillingly and slashed with the Taiyin, soul-splitting ruler. The heavenly ruler lit up with a dense purple radiance and emitted a bone-chilling cold. It then slashed out a dazzling purple saber radiance. Bam! The saber radiance and the sword radiance collided, and there was a deafening explosion. Both of them exploded at the same time and turned into hundreds of millions of pieces that scattered in the night sky. The raging shockwave spread out like ripples, sending Ji Tianxing and Yi Liushui flying. This time, the two of them were evenly matched. Both of them were shaken to the point that their internal organs were displaced, and they spat out blood. Yi Liushui was holding the extreme Yin's soul-splitting ruler, but he was not the ruler's master. He had not cultivated the technique to control the ruler, so he could not unleash the full power of the ruler. Ji Tianxing was only a martial sage, and the Sword of Burial of Heaven was only a sacred weapon. Naturally, it could not withstand the power of a sacred weapon. However, he had been constantly activating the power of the heaven-mending orb, using the sacred white light to resist the might of the divine ruler. He would not be defeated in a short period of time. However, as time went on, it was hard to tell who would emerge victorious. After all, the heaven-mending pearl's power had yet to recover, and it wouldn't be long before its power was exhausted. Kill! Yi Liushui shouted angrily. He held the Taiyin, soul-breaking ruler and attacked again. Ji Tianxing also roared. He held the Sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and slashed out a dazzling white sword light. Boom! Boom, boom, boom. The two of them fought in the sky above Yuanzhe Valley. Their figures split and merged, flashing in the night sky. The dazzling purple light blade and the white sword light collided. Dull, thunderous sounds echoed in the night sky for thousands of miles. Violent and devastating shockwaves spread out in all directions, affecting everything within a radius of 2,000 miles. Yuanzhe Valley had been destroyed in the battle. It had become a deep ruin, and the ground was full of holes and cracks. Within 2,000 miles, the ground cracked and the mountains collapsed. All that could be seen was ruins. This intense battle lasted for an entire hour. The two of them had fought for tens of thousands of moves. They were like arrows at the end of their flight, and they looked miserable. Ji Tianxing could no longer maintain the celestial dragon tyrant body and returned to normal. His white robe was tattered and dyed golden with blood. There was not a single inch of his body that was intact. It was full of cracks and bloody holes. He was a bloody man. The injuries on his chest and back were the most terrifying. There were several bowl-sized wounds, and his organs and ribs could be seen clearly. Most importantly, the power of the heaven-mending pearl had been exhausted, and it had become dim. Without the support of the sacred white light, he could not withstand the power of the Taiyin, soul-splitting ruler. Even his soul was about to be destroyed. Yi Liushui's injuries were even more miserable than his. His white hair was dyed red with blood. His left arm was chopped off, and his body was covered with more than 70 sword wounds of various sizes. The dark red blood had already dyed him into a bloody man. His magic power was also exhausted, and his consciousness was blurred. His body was swaying, and he could collapse at any time. However, he had an obsession in his heart. With his strong willpower, he persisted. He struggled to open his bloody eyes and stared at Ji Tianxing. He grinned and said, "Ji Tianxing, you are indeed strong and monstrous enough. I have to admit that you are the most powerful enemy I have ever met in my life. Without this ruler, I would not be your opponent at all. However, the outcome will still be the same. You will still die without a doubt." Ji Tianxing also bent down and sneered at Yi Liushui. "It's good that you admit it. Without the tying, soul-splitting ruler, you would have been torn into pieces by me. Now, both of us have exhausted our strength, and your injuries are worse than mine. I want to ask you, how are you going to kill me? Yi Lushui raised his right hand and waved the tying, soul-splitting ruler. He sneered and said, "With this." As his voice fell, his right hand let go of the ruler, and his hands formed a mysterious spell, drawing arcs in front of him. As the spell was formed, the tying, soul-splitting ruler also lit up with dazzling light and flew into the night sky. Yi Lushui's strength had been exhausted, and he could not use the ruler to perform the secret spell. However, he still had one last trump card. That was to use the secret spell to control the tying, soul-splitting ruler, and let the ruler explode with the strongest power to kill Ji Tianxing. In the blink of an eye, the ruler that flew into the night sky expanded thousands of times and became a ruler with purple light that was tens of thousands of feet long. The ruler was like a rainbow and also like a giant sword that could split the sky. It exploded with destructive power and slashed toward Ji Tianxing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, the tying, soul-splitting ruler slashed out 9 huge purple sword lights, which enveloped Ji Tianxing. Soul-splitting slash. Yi Lushui shouted crazily, and his eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. The power of each soul-splitting slash was enough to split the sky and earth and cut through all obstacles. Even if Ji Tianxing was in his best condition, he would not be able to resist the 9 soul-splitting slashes at the same time. Moreover, he was extremely weak at this moment. He was about to be hit by the soul-splitting slash and be chopped into pieces on the spot. Yi Lushui was very sure that Ji Tianxing had no chance of survival. Under the purple light, Ji Tianxing looked up at the night sky, and his face was filled with helplessness and hatred. However, he did not have the slightest hint of despair or resignation. When the soul-splitting slash was about to hit him, he suddenly stretched out his left hand, and a dazzling golden light shone in his palm. In the golden light, there was a small, exquisite pagoda the size of a palm. Swoosh! Chapter 2235. Bam! 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 Even after a long time, the bams still lingered in the night sky. Yi Lushui stood in the night sky, covered in blood. He looked at the 9 bam. Bam! 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 He can't escape. How can he not die? Bam! 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 What did Ji Tianxing do? How did he escape from the bam? Bam! 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 The bam! Bam! The bam! 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 Ji Tianxing! Bam! 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 He! Bam! Bam! He! Bam! 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 Rage filled his heart, and a strong sense of defeat surged into his mind, making him so angry that he almost went mad. Bam! He! Bam! 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 If I don't kill you, how can I face the Divine Master? Yi Lushui shouted with a ferocious face. He grabbed the tying soul, breaking ruler with his right hand, and flew to the north as fast as lightning. He clearly remembered that the golden light that caused Ji Tianxing to disappear was heading north. If Ji Tianxing really teleported away, he would definitely appear somewhere in the north. At the same time, in the 5th level of 9 Heavens, 10 Absolutes Tower, Shwa, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the hall that was thousands of feet wide. In the middle of the hall, on the 100-meter-tall altar of the demon clan, a figure wrapped in golden light appeared out of nowhere. After the golden light faded, the figure appeared and gradually became more and more real. His clothes were ragged, and his hair was disheveled. His white robe was dyed gold, and his aura was chaotic and weak. This was Ji Tianxing. At the moment when the soul-severing slash was about to kill him, he did not hesitate to use the secret key of the pagoda. Only then did he cross 1,000,000 miles and return to the 9 heavens, 10 absolutes pagoda. At that time, he was already at the end of his rope. The tying soul-breaking ruler was so powerful that it had sealed the space within a few hundred miles. Regardless of whether he used the armillary heaven secret skill or the teleportation secret skill, he would not be able to dodge the soul-severing slash. Only the small golden pagoda could break the space seal and bring him back to the pagoda to avoid the calamity. Phew! Ji Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. His body went limp as he sat on the ground, panting heavily. The ground of the altar was cold and filled with the runes of the great Luo divine array. There were also 18 demon god statues around it. However, when he saw this scene, he only felt warm and safe. He closed his eyes and rested for a while before he muttered to himself, "Yilu Shui, this is the 3rd time that he has tried to assassinate me. It's a pity that he has the tying soul-breaking ruler. Otherwise, I would have killed him tonight to prevent future troubles." There is a huge gap between the sage realm and the immortal realm that cannot be crossed. Even if I am invincible in the martial sage realm, I will not be able to withstand the power of a sacred weapon. After this, I must find a way to restore the sword of burial of heaven to the immortal realm as soon as possible. After muttering a few words, he pulled himself together and sat cross-legged in the great Luo divine array. He took out an elixir and consumed it to heal his injuries. The hall returned to silence. Ji Tianxing remained motionless for 5 days and 5 nights before he recovered 60% of his strength. Although his face was still pale and his mind was weak, he was no longer in danger. It was a pity that the power of the heaven-repairing pearl had been used up. Otherwise, he would have recovered quickly with the help of the heaven-repairing pearl's divine power. When he thought of this, his heart ached and he was furious. After a few years, the heaven-repairing pearl had finally recovered a bit of power. This time, it has been used up. Damn you, Lu Shui and martial god Tianju. If I don't tear you into pieces, how can I vent my anger? Ji Tianxing cursed angrily before he stood up and ended his cultivation. He looked around and stared deeply at the demon god statues and the altar beneath his feet. He could not help but fall into deep thought. Ever since I obtained the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower, I have entered it a few times and escaped death twice. However, I can only enter the first 5 levels and have not entered the 6th level yet. I wonder what is the secret of the 6th level of the Holy Pagoda? He pondered. In the past, he was only in the cross-calamity realm and could only enter the 5th level at most. Now that he was a martial sage, he should be able to try to enter the 6th level. Anyway, Yilu Shui has used up all his strength and is severely injured. He will not be able to find this place and will not dare to seek revenge at the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain. Ji Tianxing thought, since he had nothing to worry about, he would take the opportunity to try. He activated the god's eye secret technique, and his eyes turned golden. Together with his divine sense, he carefully observed the altar beneath his feet. Before he knew it, an entire day had passed. He observed the entire altar thoroughly and found many clues and clues. Combined with his understanding of the godly spirits and various secret techniques, many ideas appeared in his mind. Not long after, he had an idea and a plan. Then, he tried to channel his power and cast a dark golden dermic seal into the 18 demon god statues. However, when the seals entered the demon god statues, they were like clay oxen entering the sea. He was unwilling to give up and tried a few more times, but they all ended in failure. Therefore, he calmed down and pondered, trying to improve on his previous idea. A few hours later, he had another idea and began his second attempt. This time, after the plum blossom-like golden seals flew into the demon god statue, there was finally a reaction. The 18 demon god statues emitted a sacred golden light and moved around the altar. They began to change their positions. Finally, it's done.